Chapter 13:18. Fellow Taoist, you must be the person that Taoist Black Turtle mentioned, the one who had a misunderstanding and conflict with him during the Buddha's inheritance test, right? The one who answered Luo Fan was not the Black Turtle, but another middle-aged level 6 false sage. He was also a powerful existence that the Black Turtle called Bei Shi. Although this person's cultivation seemed to be similar to the Black Turtle's, judging from his performance, he seemed to be much stronger than the Black Turtle. At least, this could be seen from the process of the Black Turtle not being able to resist Luo Fan pushing him into the state of chaos, but he was able to reinforce the barrier at the last moment to rescue the Black Turtle. However, judging from his words at this time, he did not seem to have much hostility towards Luo Fan. "Yes, I am Luo Fan, how should I address you, fellow Taoist?" Luo Fan said with a smile. Although the Black Turtle called him Taoist Bei Shi, it was not known if the word Bei Shi was his full name. Relatively speaking, Luo Fan naturally treated him as if he did not know him. If he wanted to communicate, of course, he had to first announce his name. "I am Taoist Bei Shi, nice to meet you, fellow Taoist Luo Fan." The middle-aged man chuckled and said, "So it's Taoist Bei Shi, nice to meet you," Luo Fan said with a smile. The two actually began to exchange greetings here, completely unable to tell that they were in a state of hostility before. It was as if they were old friends at first sight. After a while, Taoist Bei Shi said to Luo Fan, "Taoist Luo Fan and Taoist Black Turtle had some misunderstandings in the past, but now that the test is over, you and I are both cultivators, it is better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Why don't we just forget about it?" "Haha, it was just a misunderstanding, I never took it to heart. As long as Taoist Black Turtle is willing, we can forget about it at any time. What do you think, Taoist Black Turtle?" Luo Fan just smiled and said. When the Black Turtle saw the two of them chatting enthusiastically, he was already extremely angry. At this time, hearing this, how could he bear it, and shouted angrily, "Forget about it? Do you know how long I planned for that test? That was 10 trillion years, 10 trillion years. Such a long-term plan has been destroyed by you, and now you want to let it go just like that?" His anger was so strong that it was unimaginable. It directly materialized and rushed out from his body, forming a raging fire that burned the surrounding void until it was slightly distorted and fluctuated violently. It was as if even the space-time of the demon realm could not withstand his anger. That was normal. A normal person would be enraged when their plan of several years was broken. Some people with weak psychological endurance would even jump off a building to commit suicide. The plan that the Black Turtle had been planning for 1 trillion years had been destroyed by Luo Fan. Even if he was a 6th-level pseudo-sage, even if his Taoist heart was tough and unshakable, he could not let it go so easily. Fellow Taoist Black Turtle. Taoist Bei Shi looked at the Black Turtle's appearance. He furrowed his brows and said indifferently. These words were like a bucket of cold water being poured over the Black Turtle's head. It completely extinguished the Black Turtle's anger, causing him to suddenly regain his calmness. He was very clear that the person in front of him seemed to be in the same realm as him, but he was a disciple of a sage. The power of his magical power was many times stronger than his. If he had not given him pointers in his early years, before he became a disciple of a sage, he had given him some kindness. How would the Black Turtle have taken a liking to him and become friends with him? If he really disobeyed his thoughts, what awaited him, even if it was not some bad fate such as death? There would not be any good consequences. However, although he had already thought of the special identity of Taoist Bei Shi, he did not dare to be presumptuous, but he could not swallow his anger towards Luo Fan for a while, so he could only remain silent. Taoist Bei Shi looked at the Black Turtle's appearance and finally remembered the kindness he had shown him. He said, "Fellow Taoist Black Turtle, although you have been planning for so many years, are you confident that even without Luo Fan, You can really pass the test of the Buddha and obtain the inheritance of the Buddha? When the black turtle heard this, his expression changed, and he instinctively wanted to refute. After all, this was a plan that he had been planning for 1,000,000,000,000 years. How could he admit defeat so easily? However, before he could refute, he thought of the process of the 3 tests that the Buddha had prepared for him and his performance in the process. In the end, he could not be thick-skinned and ignore the fact. In desperation, he could only sigh and said, "It really can't be done. It's just that, although I can't complete the test in the end, if this person didn't cause trouble at the side, I would definitely be able to get more benefits from it. How would it be like now, where I got nothing, and even the last 4 worlds that I refined were taken back?" Taoist Beisher shook his head and said, "Fellow Taoist Black Turtle, you are wrong." These words stunned the Black Turtle and he asked, "Fellow Taoist Beisher, why do you say so? I've been wanting to warn you about this for a long time. Although the inheritance of the Buddha is extremely precious and is even said to be the opportunity to become a sage, even the Buddha was unable to use it to become a sage. One can imagine how small the chance for it to make someone a sage is. How could such a small chance be worth spending billions of years pursuing? Originally, you spent billions of years planning this, which is already neglecting the essentials. If you had completely focused on cultivation during these billions of years, how could you still be a level 6 pseudo-sage? Maybe you would have become a level 7, level 8, or even a level 9 pseudo-sage. Isn't it better this way? You failed the test, so you don't have to focus on preparing for the test anymore. Isn't that a good thing? Taoist Beisher said. Luo Fan had been listening to the conversation between the two. At first, he just listened with a smile and did not care about the content of their conversation. But when Taoist Beisher said this, his heart skipped a beat. This person's identity is probably not simple. Perhaps he is a disciple of a sage, or at least a level 9 pseudo-sage's disciple. Otherwise, he would not look down on the Buddha's inheritance, nor would he make the Black Turtle believe that he did not want the inheritance of the Buddha and tell him this secret. Hearing Taoist Beisher's words, the expression on the Black Turtle's face kept changing. Sometimes he was angry, sometimes he was relieved, sometimes he became ferocious again, and then he became calm again. There were all kinds of changes, almost like a chameleon. After a while, the Black Turtle finally let out a long sigh, and his expression became one of realization. In his eyes, there was a light as if he had seen through everything. Then, the aura on his body suddenly skyrocketed uncontrollably, instantly breaking through his original level and stepping into a brand new level that Luo Fan could also feel. The level of a level 7 pseudo-sage. It was because of what Taoist Beisher said. He directly broke through the shackles of his original cultivation realm, breaking through the bottleneck between level 6 pseudo-sage and level 7 pseudo-sage, stepping into the level 7 pseudo-sage realm. He stepped into the 7th step below sage. He was only 2 steps away from becoming a saint, just one breakthrough. The aura of a level 7 pseudo-sage was more than 1,000 times stronger than a level 6 pseudo-sage. In the blink of an eye, this aura opened up a vast and boundless space. This space. The sky was round and the earth was round, but the terrain was a world that Luo Fan was completely unfamiliar with. In it, there were hundreds of millions of creatures fighting. These creatures all had great power and contained a high realm. In their fight, there were hundreds of millions of kinds of mysteries of the great Tao, and there were even some chaotic supreme principles contained in it. Obviously, this world was the world of the Black Turtle's own mind, and the living beings in that world were the many mysteries that the Black Turtle had mastered. Many wonderful principles. All these changes only appeared for a few breaths, and then completely disappeared, completely restrained. At this time, the Black Turtle had turned into a very ordinary middle-aged man. His image was quite different from before. It seemed that even his mentality was much younger. Taoist Bei Shi watched the whole process of the black turtle's breakthrough. There was only a gratified smile on his face. Obviously, the black turtle's breakthrough seemed to be painstakingly planned. At this time, Luo Fan did not panic. Although the black turtle had made a breakthrough, he still had the confidence to escape from him. However, he was still confident that he could escape from him. In fact, if he was not careful, he was even confident that he could send him into the primal chaos state and let the primal chaos state help him destroy his opponent. The black turtle came back to his senses, and first bowed to Taoist Bei Shi, saying, "Thank you for your advice. If it weren't for you, I don't know how many billions of years it would take for me to realize my mistake, and to be able to see through the mystery of the seventh step. You're too polite. If it weren't for you, I would have been dead for trillions of years. What's a little bit of repayment now?" Taoist Bei Shi smiled. "I'm ashamed. I was just casually taking action at that time, and my contribution was so limited. But now, for countless billions of years, I have been basking in your glory. I have been saved by you countless times. If you say that again, I don't dare to be friends with you anymore." The black turtle sighed. Taoist Bei Shi naturally tried to persuade him, saying that the other party's little effort changed his fate, and that he still had to thank him today. After a round of pleasantly thanking one another, both of them were very satisfied. Then, they focused their attention on Luo Fan. "I'm surprised that you didn't run away." The black turtle smiled. At this time, he no longer showed any anger or hatred. Although the way he looked at Luo Fan was not intimate, it was not cold either. "Why should I run?" Luo Fan smiled. "Why should I run? Is there a need to say it? Now that I have a breakthrough in my cultivation, killing you is as easy as flipping my hand. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you?" The level 7 pseudo-divine turtle said. "Why kill me? I don't think you have a reason to kill me. Also, I don't think you can kill me." Luo Fan's tone was calm, but there was an indescribable confidence in his words, as if everything was under his control. "Ha ha ha!" The black turtle suddenly burst into laughter. After a while, he said, "I hated you no matter how I looked at you before, but now I find that you are quite interesting. Alright, my name is Taoist Black Turtle. Today, let us put all our hatred behind us." "Greetings, Taoist Black Turtle." Luo Fan chuckled and formally greeted Taoist Black Turtle, and Taoist Black Turtle solemnly returned the greeting. After this, the two of them could be considered to have completely swept away all the hatred in the past, and from then on returned to zero. Good. Since the two of you have now put aside all enmity, why don't we go into the cave residence and talk about the Tao? Taoist Bei Shi laughed happily. "That's how it should be. My cave residence is nearby. I wonder if Taoist Luo Fan would do me the honor?" Taoist Black Turtle also smiled and invited. When Luo Fan heard this, a thought flashed through his mind and he smiled. I wouldn't dare to ask for it. Just now, they were about to fight to the death, and now entering the other party's cave residence seemed to be extremely dangerous, but Luo Fan thought about it. He knew that there would not be much danger in it at all. At the very least, he had enough escape routes. Even if the cave residence was special and had some incredible ability, he could still use the Divine Court Heavenly Cauldron, a level 9 pseudo-sage treasure, to break through everything and escape. There would be no danger to his life at all. In that case, there was an opportunity to communicate with this level 7 pseudo-sage existence on equal footing, so why not? The reason why Luo Fan was confident that he could break through everything with the Divine Court Heavenly Cauldron was very simple. The Divine Court Heavenly Cauldron was a level 9 pseudo-sage treasure, although it was not a real level 9 pseudo-sage treasure refined with enough materials. It was still a level 9 pseudo-sage treasure after all. As Luo Fan's cultivation realm continued to improve, as he approached the level 9 pseudo-sage level, the power he could exert when he used this magic treasure also became stronger and stronger. Now that he had become a level 3 pseudo-saint, he could already exert 1% of the power of this magic tool. Although it was only 1% of the power, it was definitely not a problem to completely destroy a level 8 pseudo-saint. To be able to unleash such power, the traps laid down by level 7 and level 6 pseudo-sages must be extremely powerful. Naturally, there was no danger to him. Seeing Luo Fan nod in agreement, both Taoist Divine Turtle and Taoist Hermit showed a cheerful smile on their faces. They looked at each other and saw a look of appreciation in each other's eyes. Obviously, he admired Luo Fan for actually daring to agree to go to Taoist Mysterious Turtle's cave abode without any discount, and did not even propose to open a cave abode here. Such boldness, such confidence. However, it wasn't something an ordinary cultivator could possess. Under this admiration, the two of them even had the thought of truly befriending Luo Fan at the same time. After confirming, the three of them turned into 3 beams of light and shot toward the area where Taoist Divine Turtle's aura was the strongest. The speed of the 3 of them was extremely astonishing. Almost in the blink of an eye, they had crossed a distance of hundreds of millions of miles and appeared on a small island. Of course, although this island was small, it was only small when compared to the scale of the demonic realm. In terms of area, the area of this island was even larger than the area of dozens of Earths. And on this island, there were famous mountains and scenic spots everywhere, and everywhere there was a dazzling glow. There were all kinds of exotic flowers and plants, dense ancient trees, strange rocks and strange mountains. Everything that one could imagine was here. With a glance, Luo Fan found that there were many cultivators on this island. Among them, there were more than 100 pseudo-saint level cultivators. Although these pseudo-saint level cultivators were generally only level 1 or level 2 pseudo-saint level, and those who were level 3 and above were only in the single digits, compared to the many islands that Luo Fan had been to before, they were many times stronger. And in addition to the many pseudo-saint level cultivators, there were also countless pseudo-saint level and below. However, they only lived around the pseudo-saint level cultivators, as if they were their disciples. "These are your disciples, right?" Luo Fan could not help but exclaim when he sensed the situation on this island. "I'm sorry. I've been working for trillions of years to build up this little foundation. I'm a little ashamed," Taoist Mysterious Turtle said. As they spoke, the 3 of them had already landed in a group of cave residences in the center of the island. This was the location with the best cultivation environment on the entire island. Even compared to the center of the island where the Ling Kingdom was located, the cultivation environment here was hundreds of times better. This was the opposite of the size of the other 2 islands, showing that this island was special and mysterious. And in this group of cave residences, the aura of pseudo-saint level cultivators rose into the sky. This was the place with the highest concentration of pseudo-saint level cultivators on the entire island. The place where Luo Fan and the others landed was in front of the largest cave residence in this group of cave residences. Here, multicolored light shone everywhere, strange trees were everywhere, and wisps of chaotic yuan qi were mixed in with the rich innate yuan qi, making this place look like a fairyland. "It's really a good place," Luo Fan exclaimed. "Sorry for the inconvenience." Taoist Mysterious Turtle chuckled. "Such a good place is rare, even my cave residence pales in comparison." Taoist Sad World explained with a smile. "I can see that. However, to be able to provide so many cultivators with cultivation resources on this small island, fellow Taoist must have expended a lot of effort. I wonder how it was achieved?" Luo Fan first exclaimed in admiration, and then asked his own doubts. Although the area of this island was larger than the area of dozens of Earths put together, and it would not be a problem for a population of several trillion people to survive, such an island could only support 2 or 3 pseudo-saint level cultivators at most. Even if the pseudo-saint level cultivator was a big spender of cultivation resources, the number would be even lower. But now, such an island could support hundreds of pseudo-saint level cultivators, and an even greater number of quasi-saint level cultivators. This was an unimaginable support capacity. Luo Fan would not believe that there was nothing mysterious about it. Chapter 13:19. After feeling proud of himself, he did not bother to change the topic, but directly began to explain to Luo Fan. This island looks like an ordinary island, but in fact it has been refined into a special magic weapon by me. Although its level is not high, only a level 3 pseudo-sage treasure, it has a unique use. It can create and destroy worlds at any time, and obtain all resources that cannot be obtained normally. It is precisely because of this that it can support the cultivation of so many cultivators. When Luo Fan heard this, he could not help but be slightly surprised. This island was actually a level 3 pseudo-sage treasure? This was something he had not sensed before. After Taoist Mysterious Turtle said this, Luo Fan carefully comprehended it. Only then did he discover a trace of extremely obscure traces, faintly feeling that this island might really be a powerful magic weapon. Fellow Taoist's magical power is brilliant, I admire you. He could only praise like this. This kind of method of refining magic weapons was indeed worthy of admiration. This kind of magic weapon was completely integrated into heaven and earth, completely integrated into the laws of the demonic realm, and even integrated with the great Tao of this world, was something he had never seen before. The degree of subtlety was amazing, and Luo Fan could not help but admire it. After talking for a while, the three of them naturally entered the cave abode. In the cave abode there were all kinds of strange wonders and all kinds of mysterious artifacts, which only made Luo Fan feel that it was an eye-opener. Next, Luo Fan stayed in this cave abode of Taoist Mysterious Turtle for 3 years. During these 3 years, he, Taoist Mysterious Turtle, and Taoist Beishe had a discussion about the Tao. They chatted about the world, and occasionally, from time to time, he would give a sermon on this island, preaching the wonderful method of his cultivation to the many cultivators on this island, and explaining the mystery of the great Tao of heaven and earth to these many cultivators. In this way, a full 3 years had passed. Whether it was Luo Fan, Taoist Beishe, who was a disciple of the sage, or Taoist Mysterious Turtle, who had just broken through to the level 7 pseudo-sage, all felt that they had gained a lot. All 3 of them were quite satisfied with the decision to turn enemies into friends. They felt that this was quite the right thing to do. During the exchange, Luo Fan also learned that this Taoist Beishe was the grand disciple of one of the 54 sages of the demonic realm, called the Heaven Beginning Sage. That was to say, his master, the disciple of the Heaven Beginning Sage, a disciple of a sage of the Heaven Beginning Sage, although he was not a real disciple of a sage. However, such an identity was extremely valuable in the demon world. He was definitely not a sect master of an ordinary sect. Not even the sect master could compare. In fact, even those grade 9 pseudo-sacred sages would have to give him some face when facing him, and would not dare to be too impudent. As the grand disciple of the Heaven's Beginning Saint, Taoist Beishe's knowledge was naturally extremely vast. Even Luo Fan's knowledge in some aspects was somewhat inferior to his. Through these 3 years, Luo Fan had obtained the greatest benefits from him. As the grand disciple of the Heaven Beginning Sage, Taoist Beishe was naturally extremely knowledgeable. Even Luo Fan was not as knowledgeable as him in some aspect. Through these 3 years, he had gained the most from Taoist Beishe. However, compared to Taoist Beishe, he had cultivated for a very long time, even more than 1,000,000,000,000 years. Such a long time had allowed him to accumulate unimaginable experience, allowing him to obtain infinite knowledge. During the exchange, although there was no overly mysterious or incredible method revealed, but the wisdom that was accumulated over a long period of time revealed in a few words also made both Luo Fan and Taoist Beishe feel as if their horizons had been broadened. On this day, Taoist Beishe suddenly said to Luo Fan, "In another 10 years, it will be the Chun Palace's treasure meet that is held once every 100,000 years. I wonder if you are interested in going there? Chin Palace Treasure Conference? What kind of conference is that? Luo Fan could not help but be curious when he heard this completely unfamiliar name. When Taoist Divine Turtle heard this, a look of realization appeared on his face, as if he should have known it long ago, but only remembered it now after being reminded by Taoist Beishur. So there are only 10 years left. Fellow Taoist may not know, but the Chun Palace Treasure Discussion is the grandest exchange meeting in the Chun Sea territory. It is held once every 100,000 years, and each meeting lasts for 10 years. The location of the event was an island that was more than 10 trillion kilometers away from where they were right now. If I calculate the time, there really isn't even 10 years until the next treasure discussion. This sea was already out of the war-torn Lost Sea. More specifically, it had passed through more than a dozen sea areas. This sea area was called the Chun Sea area. It was vast and boundless, and the islands within it were almost endless. At least, for Luo Fan, he had yet to specifically count how many islands there were in this sea area. I wonder what precious items there are in the treasure conference? Luo Fan asked. In the treasure conference there are supernatural powers, techniques, magic treasures, pills, worlds, universes, and so on. Almost everything related to cultivation will be there. It may not be of much use to existences like you and me, but it can broaden our horizons, so it is a good place to go. At this time, the person who explained to Luo Fan was not Taoist Mysterious Turtle, but Taoist Beishur. Luo Fan heard this and nodded, but in his heart, he had the idea of going to the treasure conference to take a look. Although it was indeed as Taoist Beishur had said, it was very unlikely that the divine abilities, techniques, magic treasures, pills, worlds, and universes in the treasure discussion would have anything that could move his heart, but if it was truly all-encompassing, then perhaps there would be items that could touch his heart and allow him to obtain some revelations. Moreover, even if there were none, through seeing the many treasures in the treasure conference, he would be able to understand the cultivation world of the demonic realm better. Why not? After thinking this through, Luo Fan smiled and said, I see. Then let's go to Chun Palace Island. Hearing Luo Fan's words, Taoist Mysterious Turtle and Taoist Beishur both smiled and nodded. They did not have any special plans. It was just that after a few years of interaction, they felt that the person before them was worth befriending, so they decided to share the most special items in this sea area with him. Even if Luo Fan did not agree and did not want to go, they would not try to persuade him. And if Luo Fan wanted to go, it would not be any trouble for them. Thus, they put aside the matter of the Chun Palace treasure discussion and continued to discuss the Tao. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. One day after 10 years, Taoist Mysterious Turtle pinched his fingers and said, The treasure conference in Chun Palace is starting today. Why don't we go now? That's right. Luo Fan laughed when he heard this. None of them were ordinary cultivators. Since they had decided, they naturally would not delay any longer. They got up and left the cave residence. The matter of the treasure conference in Chun Palace. It was not a secret in the Chun Sea area. Almost all cultivators knew about the treasure conference. The cultivators who cultivated on this island under Taoist Mysterious Turtle's command were no exception. When the three of them came out, the island was already very lively. It turned out that there were many cultivators quietly cultivating in various places. They had all left their places of cultivation, or invited friends and relatives, or visited everywhere. It was obvious that they were planning to go there. Luo Fan and the others did not hide their figures. Soon, those cultivators soon discovered the three of them. In the past few years, Luo Fan and the others would give lectures from time to time. For the cultivators on the island, it was a great kindness. The cultivators on the island had long since treated them as elders and revered them. Even for those cultivators whose cultivation was higher than Luo Fan's, after listening to his lectures a few times, the arrogance that originally existed was completely dispelled. They no longer looked down on them. Now that they saw Luo Fan and the others coming out of the cave residence together, they naturally did not dare to be negligent. Like rain, they hurried to this position to pay their respects. Taoist Mysterious Turtle looked at them and chuckled. "We are going to the treasure conference to take a look. Do as you please." Immediately, there were naturally many cultivators who wanted to travel with them so that they could serve them along the way. To such cultivators, Taoist Mysterious Turtle only politely declined, saying that he wanted some peace and quiet and did not want to be disturbed by too many people along the way. This was, of course, to take care of Luo Fan and Taoist Beishe. After all, these cultivators were his disciples, so he naturally did not care. But for the two of them, even their knowledge and cultivation realm were far inferior to theirs. It was impossible for them to treat such existences as equals. Since that was the case, staying by their side would only make them annoyed. Hearing Taoist Mysterious Turtle's refusal, the cultivators who had made the request naturally felt a little regretful. After all, among the three of them, each of their cultivation realm was countless times higher than theirs. Just a casual instruction from them would be a great harvest for them. Traveling with them was naturally an excellent opportunity to reap benefit. Now that they had been rejected, they might not feel regretful. Of course, even if they felt regretful, they did not dare to raise any objections. Even if Taoist Mysterious Turtle appeared to be kind, even if they were his disciples, the strong were strong and the weak were weak. The weak opposing the strong was a provocation that could cost lives. After dismissing the crowd, Taoist Mysterious Turtle said with some shame, "These little guys have no eyesight at all. My friend is too serious. In fact, it doesn't matter even if they follow us." Luo Fan chuckled. "Forget it, I'm a little annoyed with them." "Let's go," Taoist Beishe said with a smile. His words, of course, did not necessarily mean that he was really annoyed with them in his heart, it was just a gesture he needed to make. "Please lead the way, my friend." Luo Fan did not say anything more and said with a smile. Taoist Mysterious Turtle nodded, turned into a ray of light, and rushed straight in the southwest direction. Luo Fan and Taoist Beishe were also behind him, flying up at the same time and following behind him, heading in the same direction. A distance of more than 10 trillion miles was naturally nothing to Luo Fan and the others. If they wanted to, they could even reach that place in a breath's time. However, it was obvious that now the three of them had to be wary of each other and could not advance at full speed at will. The reason was very simple. For example, since Taoist Mysterious Turtle was leading the way, it was naturally not appropriate for him to directly take a step forward and completely disappear without a trace. In that case, logically speaking, Luo Fan should indeed be able to sense his destination, but what if? Since he was leading the way, it was natural that he had to consider everything that could possibly be overlooked. This was the way to treat a guest. Therefore, he could only slow down. He was not slow, but he could not rush to the target location at a speed that was not too fast either. Using this method of travel, it took the three of them half a day to reach the place where Chungong Island was located. Along the way, they had also seen many bright rays of light rushing in the same direction as them, among which there were even quite a number of cultivators who were at a higher level than Luo Fan in terms of cultivation realm, which was higher than level 3 pseudo-saint cultivators. This made Luo Fan finally feel what a magnificent world he was in. Chungong Island was extremely vast. At the very least, it was about 100 times larger than the island that Taoist Mysterious Turtle had refined into a magic treasure. In this sea region, it really was like a vast and boundless continent. There were countless buildings on this island. There were all kinds of buildings densely packed together. They covered almost half of the island's surface, the remaining half. There were also all kinds of uneven terrain that could not be used to build buildings, rivers, and some essential forest and garden landscape. And at this time, on the entire island, there were thousands of pseudo-saint auras present. And under the pseudo-saint auras, There were also 10 times more auras of quasi-saint. There were even more auras below the level of quasi-saint. Apart from the auras of cultivators, there were also many buildings on this island. There were also many ordinary living beings. They lived on this island as if they were in an ordinary country, whether they were laborers, businessmen, scholars, or officials. There were all kinds of them, showing all kinds of signs of the mortal world. After arriving at Chun Gong Island, Taoist Mysterious Turtle slowed down again, and flew at an even slower speed on the island. As he flew, he explained to Luo Fan, "The owner of this island is called Revered One, a powerful level 9 pseudo-saint supremacy. It is because of his strength that he can suppress many cultivators, making them not dare to act rashly and abide by the trading rules on this island. Fellow Taoist Luo Fan, you must be careful here, do not touch the taboo." Revered One? Luo Fan could not help but be shocked when he heard this. There was actually a level 9 pseudo-saint cultivator on this island? This was beyond his expectations. From what he could sense, although there were thousands of pseudo-saints on this island, and there were even no lack of level 6 and level 7 pseudo-saints, there were very few level 8 pseudo-saints, let alone level 9 pseudo-saints. Yes, Revered One is an extremely powerful supremacy. Even my master has praised him. Taoist Beishe hurriedly said when he saw Luo Fan so surprised. Obviously, he was worried that Luo Fan would not know the severity of the situation and anger Revered One. After all, Luo Fan looked like a hothead no matter how he looked at it. Back then, when facing the level 6 pseudo-saint Taoist Mysterious Turtle, he did not even say a single word to Revered One. He was not sure if Luo Fan would do the same to Revered One. "I see. Fellow Taoist, don't worry. I won't be reckless." Luo Fan instantly knew what they were worried about when he saw their expressions, and a smile appeared on his face. "Of course we trust you." Taoist Mysterious Turtle smiled awkwardly. Taoist Beishe also chuckled at the side. From the looks of it, they seemed to have already believed Luo Fan's words, but Luo Fan did not have to guess to know what they were thinking in their hearts. They must be cursing. The three of them soon arrived at an area in the center of the island. This was where the pseudo-sacred realm cultivators stayed, and where they traded with each other. Almost everyone who flew in the sky and walked on the ground here was a pseudo-saint cultivator. Even those who were not pseudo-saint cultivators were servants that followed the pseudo-saint cultivators. However, even though there were so many pseudo-saint cultivators, it did not mean that Luo Fan and the other two did not attract attention when they arrived. On the contrary, when the three of them landed, the pseudo-saint cultivators nearby could not help but pay attention to them. There was no other reason. Even though there were so many pseudo-saint cultivators around, most of them were pseudo-saint below level 5. There were very few pseudo-saint cultivators that were above level 5, and each of them was very ostentatious. Under such circumstances, one could imagine how conspicuous it was for a level 6 pseudo-saint and a level 7 pseudo-saint to suddenly arrive together. How could they not pay attention to them? As for Luo Fan, who was following them, he was only a level 3 pseudo-saint. In comparison, he was so inconspicuous that he was naturally not worthy of their attention. Today is the first day. In the past, there wouldn't have been any major trade fairs. "Let's just walk around and have a look," Taoist God Turtle said to Luo Fan. "All right." Luo Fan looked at the pseudo-saint cultivators who had worlds suspended in front of them as if they were setting up stalls on the ground. Those pseudo-saint cultivators who were so high up in the outside world that they could destroy an island with a slap and create countless worlds with a single thought were actually like secular peddlers here, setting up stalls on both sides of the road. Even if they used worlds as support to set up their stalls, even if there were worlds suspended in front of them to store the goods they wanted to sell, it did not change the nature of their behavior. Since they were going to walk around, the three of them naturally would not gather together again. Although Taoist God Turtle and Taoist Beishe brought Luo Fan here to broaden his horizons, it did not mean that they would always be by Luo Fan's side. After greeting each other, Taoist God Turtle and Taoist Bayshore left, leaving Luo Fan curiously looking at the goods placed on both sides of the road. They were all pseudo-saint cultivators, so it was not a problem for them to open up worlds and create universes. Chapter 1320. After walking around for half a day, Luo Fan felt like his horizons had been broadened. There were many strange things, and many of them even made Luo Fan want to take them for himself. As he walked, he suddenly noticed a small stall by the side of the road selling a world. He could not help but be slightly shocked. The world was extremely unique. It seemed like a dream world, yet it also seemed like a real world at the same time. There were some indescribable mysteries in it. A world like this seemed to be displayed by the level 7 pseudo-saint that he encountered during the inheritance test of the Buddhist Supreme. With a thought, Luo Fan walked forward and said to the level 2 pseudo-saint that was selling the world, "Is this the world that you're looking for?" The level 2 pseudo-saint had the appearance of a young lady. She was not extremely beautiful, but there was a sense of gentleness in her, causing others to naturally have a good impression of her. When the level 2 pseudo-saint that looked like a young lady heard Luo Fan's question, she glanced over and saw through Luo Fan's cultivation realm. Her expression turned slightly stern as she said, "That's right. I accidentally created this world. Although it's not very mysterious, it's still quite mysterious. That's why I want to exchange it for something that's beneficial to my cultivation." "I wonder what you're looking for in exchange?" Luo Fan asked. Generally speaking, things like equivalence no longer existed for beings who had reached the pseudo-sage level. It was even to the extent that it didn't exist for cultivators at the first heaven realm or above. The reason was simple. It was because cultivators above the innate Grand Luo realm already possessed the ability to create worlds. Since they already possessed the ability to create worlds, it was extremely easy for them to create some matter. In that case, they could spend some time to create anything that could be used as an ordinary equivalent. It could be said that they could create as many as they wanted. How could they use something that everyone acknowledged as an ordinary equivalent? Therefore, for cultivators above the innate Grand Luo realm, they wanted to trade. Hence, they could only barter for something. In other words, what did they want to sell, what did they want to get, and what did they want to buy? What did they have? The two could only discuss and see if they were compatible with each other. If they were not compatible, then the transaction could not proceed. If they were compatible, it would naturally be a happy ending for both of them. Upon hearing this, the level 2 pseudo-sage cultivator nodded. "I want a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure. Half-step pseudo-sanctuary level treasure." Luo Fan was slightly taken aback upon hearing that. Then, he came to a realization. He knew that this level 2 pseudo-saint was probably prepared for his own disciples or disciples. Therefore, he said, "Half-step pseudo-saint treasure is fine. What kind of half-step pseudo-sage treasure do you want?" Hearing Luo Fan's words, the second-level pseudo-sage couldn't help but be overjoyed. It turned out that she had just casually mentioned it. In fact, she had already been prepared to be rejected, and then put forward some conditions that were inferior. He raised his hand and a small ball of spiritual light condensed in front of him. He sent it to Luo Fan and said, "This is the characteristic that a half-step pseudo-sage treasure should have. I hope you can help me." Luo Fan raised his hand and received the spiritual light. He instantly received the infinite information contained in the spiritual light. In the blink of an eye, he understood what kind of treasure this second-level pseudo-sage wanted. What she wanted was a complete magic treasure embryo. This magic treasure possessed an extremely special nature. The various restrictions and techniques constructed within it could be easily changed. The existence that obtained this magic treasure would be able to easily change the magic treasure into the form that they desired. If necessary, he could even use some special methods that he had already prepared to upgrade this half-step pseudo-holiness treasure to the true pseudo-holiness grade. Very good design. Luo Fan could not help but praise after seeing the various secrets of this treasure. Thank you, fellow Taoist. I wonder how long it will take for you to refine such a treasure? The second-level pseudo-sage asked carefully. Very soon. Luo Fan smiled slightly. With a thought, he spread out his right hand in his sleeve. Then, the entire demon realm suddenly underwent countless changes. Each of these changes was extremely subtle. Even the cultivators who were constantly sensing the entire demon realm would find it extremely difficult to notice these changes. The final target of these changes was Luo Fan's right hand that was in his sleeve at this moment. A ball of strange things was condensed on his right hand. None of the pseudo-sages present could notice the changes here. At most, some of the fifth-level pseudo-sages vaguely felt that something was wrong. They only felt that there seemed to be some kind of abnormal situation nearby. However, they just thought that a certain pseudo-sage was experimenting, so they did not pay too much attention to it. Soon, they focused their attention elsewhere. Even the woman in front of Luo Fan could not notice the obvious changes at all. She only knew that this pseudo-sage, who had a higher cultivation realm than her, seemed to be doing something. After a while, Luo Fan stretched out his right hand with a fist-sized, golden, pill-like strange thing in his hand. He extended it to the woman and said, "Take a look and see if this half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure meets your requirements." The second-level pseudo-sage was really horrified at this moment, and a look of disbelief appeared on her face. She had originally been prepared to wait for thousands of years. Although this was a little slow for a transaction, she wanted a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure and nothing else. However, she didn't expect that in just a few breaths, before she could even figure out what the person in front of her had done, the magic treasure that she wanted was already placed in front of her. How unbelievable and shocking was this! While exclaiming in shock, she did not dare to be negligent. She hurriedly took the fist-sized pill and carefully sensed it. After a while, she nodded and praised, "Fellow Taoist is really powerful. I'm really impressed that you managed to refine such a treasure so quickly. This is a world. From now on, it belongs to you." That pill was not the true appearance of the half-step false holy treasure, but it was just a cover that Luo Fan had casually used to conceal the appearance of the half-step false holy treasure. If someone obtained this half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure, as long as they refined it according to the method, they would naturally be able to change it into a special form and give it special mysteries. As the second-level pseudo-sage said, she pressed the world that was originally placed in front of her into a fist-sized pill and handed it to Luo Fan. Luo Fan nodded with a smile. After taking the pill, he sensed it slightly. Sure enough, the world contained the aura of some special world. It seemed to contain some of the mysteries of the special world that the seven-level pseudo-sage had opened up. "Fellow Taoist, please wait." The second-level pseudo-sage saw that Luo Fan was about to turn around and leave. He gritted his teeth. He said, "Is there anything else?" Luo Fan stopped in his tracks. He asked curiously. The transaction had been completed. The customer who stayed now either had something good or needed help with something. Either way, it was something that interested Luo Fan. Seeing that Luo Fan had stopped, the second-level pseudo-sage was slightly happy and said, "I wonder if you can refine a level 1 pseudo-saint grade treasure?" Level 1 pseudo-saint grade treasure? That's a bit troublesome. Even if I can refine it, it's not that simple. It won't be as fast as before. Luo Fan frowned. With his current level of use of the law of causality, he could at most create a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure out of thin air. It was still a little difficult for him to forge a pseudo-sage level Dharma treasure. If he had to create one, he could only first create a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure and then use the law of causality several times to upgrade this half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure to the pseudo-saint grade. This way, not only would it be 1,000 times more troublesome, the time it would take would definitely be much longer than creating a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure. Hearing Luo Fan's answer, the second-level pseudosage couldn't help but be overjoyed and said, "It's good to be slow. It's good to be slow. I have actually inadvertently opened up tens of thousands of worlds with special characteristics. If you can create a true pseudo-saint grade treasure, I will exchange all of those worlds with you. What do you think?" Saying that, she looked at Luo Fan eagerly. Hearing her words, Luo Fan couldn't help but be shocked. He was not surprised that this level 2 pseudosage cultivator wanted a level 1 pseudosage artifact. After all, the greatest use of a pseudosage artifact was for a cultivator at the half-step pseudosage level to refine this artifact. With the help of this artifact, they would be able to raise their cultivation realm to the half-step pseudosage level. Therefore, the reason why this second-level pseudosage wanted a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure was of course to prepare it for her relatives or disciples who were half-step pseudo-saint grade. Compared to a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure, a first-level pseudo-saint grade treasure had more magical uses and was more helpful in raising one's cultivation realm. There was even no need for a cultivator to refine a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure. As long as they could understand the wonders of the treasure, they could naturally become a first-level pseudo-saint. This directly eliminated the bottleneck that a half-step pseudo-saint grade cultivator would definitely encounter in the process of upgrading to a first-level pseudo-saint. For a half-step pseudo-saint grade cultivator, it was very beneficial. For a second-level pseudo-saint grade cultivator, she would certainly be willing to pay a huge price for it. What surprised Luo Fan was that this second-level pseudosage actually dared to claim that there were tens of thousands of worlds with special characteristics. If these special worlds were like the world that he had obtained now, which was accidentally opened up after countless experiments, then how many billions of worlds would she have to open up to be able to accumulate tens of thousands of worlds? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but have some doubts in his eyes. The special worlds that you are talking about, are they the same as this world? Are they accidentally born and can't be repeated? Of course, how would I dare to lie to you? If you don't believe me, I can take you there to have a look, the second-level pseudosage said. With that, she looked at Luo Fan eagerly and expectantly, obviously hoping that Luo Fan would agree to go with her. Luo Fan had the same intention, so he nodded and said, "Where is it? I have to take a good look. If there really are tens of thousands of such worlds, then even if it takes a bit more effort, I'll be able to refine a grade 1 pseudo-holy treasure for you." Hearing this, the second-level pseudosage treasure showed a look of joy on her face. She waved her hand, and a very ordinary major kiliacosm appeared beside her. This major kiliacosm was extremely vast. Although it was far inferior to a major kiliacosm like the demon realm, it was much stronger than an ordinary major kiliacosm. Obviously, this second-level pseudosage had placed her tens of thousands of worlds in this major kiliacosm. "Please, fellow Taoist." The second-level pseudosage waved her hand above the major kiliacosm, and a door appeared in front of them. Seeing this, Luo Fan nodded his head. Without hesitation, he stepped into the boundless world. The woman also stepped into the major kiliacosm and appeared next to Luo Fan. This was a major kiliacosm. It looked like a boundless void. In comparison, it seemed similar to the Earth universe after the world shattered, but there was an essential difference. The sky full of stars. They were worlds. The void. It was boundless nothingness. It looked more like the starry sky of the demon realm. "I'm Luo Fan. How should I address you?" Luo Fan looked at the countless worlds. He couldn't help but feel impressed and smiled. The woman was stunned at first, then smiled. "I'm Hu Yun. Greetings, fellow Taoist Luo Fan. So it's you, fellow Taoist Hu Yun. I didn't expect you to be so interested in opening up worlds. I admit that I've opened up many worlds, but compared to you, I'm still far behind," Luo Fan said with a smile. Hu Yun finally understood why Luo Fan was suddenly interested in getting to know her. She was relieved and smiled. I've been fascinated by worlds since I was young. Ever since I became an innate grand heavenly Luo and gained the ability to open up worlds, I've spent almost all my time opening up worlds. It's been hundreds of billions of years now, and I've only managed to accumulate so many worlds. What's there to be embarrassed about? I can't wait to admire you. To be able to open up so many different and mysterious worlds, fellow Taoist's ability to open up worlds is the second person I've seen in my life. Your future is definitely bright and boundless, Luo Fan said with a smile. The second person? Although the woman spoke modestly, she was actually extremely proud of her ability to open up worlds. When she heard Luo Fan say that she was only the second person he'd seen, she couldn't help but feel competitive. She asked, "May I know who's the person with the strongest ability to open up worlds that you've seen?" "Which person?" "I don't know his name. It's just that I fought with him once by chance. At that time, the many methods he used to open up the world were really dazzling. If we weren't enemies at that time, I would have even thought of getting to know him," Luo Fan said with a smile. "Even you don't know?" Hu Yun couldn't help but show a look of pity. "Yeah, although it's a little regretful, I'd rather not see him again," Luo Fan said with slight regret. "Why is that?" Hu Yun couldn't help but be surprised. "Because he's a level 7 pseudo-saint. Back when I fought him, his strength was restricted for some reason, which allowed me to take advantage of him and exchange a few moves with him. If I meet him again, I won't have such a good thing anymore. If his strength isn't restricted, I'm not confident that I can defeat him," Luo Fan said with a smile. Hearing this, Hu Yun's expression slightly changed. Even in her opinion, a level 7 pseudo-saint was a supreme existence that could crush countless of her with a single finger. Offending such an existence was equivalent to sending one's life to the tip of a blade. At this moment, how could she dare to compete with that existence in terms of opening up worlds? She even felt a little unbearable when Luo Fan said that her ability to open up worlds was only inferior to his. She felt that the praise was too much. As they spoke, the two of them had already arrived at a corner of the vast Great Thousand World. In this world, there were hundreds of millions of worlds densely packed together. There were all kinds of worlds. There were Great Thousand Worlds, Medium Thousand Worlds, and Small Thousand World. Each one of them was like a star in the universe, emitting all kinds of light in the void, illuminating the entire world in a very beautiful way. It was natural for people to feel an inexplicable shock in their hearts when they saw it. The place that Luo Fan and Hu Yun had arrived at was a corner of the boundless world. Here, there was a faint ring of gray light that surrounded several tens of thousands of worlds, separating this area from the other areas and allowing these several tens of thousands of worlds to exist independently of the other worlds in the sky. When Luo Fan saw these worlds, his eyes couldn't help but light up. Among these worlds, not all of them had mysteries that moved him, but each of them had characteristics that couldn't be replicated. In other words, the birth of these worlds was the result of many coincidences. Even if he wanted to create a similar world again, it would be difficult for him to do so. Even if he used all kinds of methods to simulate the circumstances of the creation of these worlds, the worlds he obtained in the end would definitely be different from these worlds. It would be impossible to create a world that was exactly the same as these worlds. In addition, more than half of these worlds contained mysteries that Luo Fan found difficult to understand. They vaguely felt like the worlds that were casually opened by the level 7 pseudo-saint. In an instant, Luo Fan decided that he definitely couldn't let go of these tens of thousands of worlds. He had to obtain them. After thinking it through, Luo Fan said to Hu Yun, "If these tens of thousands of worlds are the worlds that fellow Taoist mentioned, then I can agree to this deal." Chapter 13:21. Although these tens of thousands of worlds were extremely precious to Hu Yun, who was a level 2 pseudo-sage, and they were the only existence that she couldn't replicate even if she wanted to. However, compared to the level 1 pseudo-sage treasure that she wanted, these tens of thousands of worlds were nothing at all. For a level 2 pseudosage, if it was an ordinary magic treasure, not to mention a half-step pseudosage treasure, even a level 1 pseudosage treasure would be nothing to her. At most, it would take her tens of thousands of years or at most hundreds of thousands of years to refine one. This amount of time was really nothing to a level 2 pseudosage existence. It was like a blink of an eye. However, it was obvious that the magic treasure that Hu Yun wanted was not an ordinary magic treasure. Compared to other ordinary magic treasures, the magic treasure that she wanted could not have a strong aura that belonged to her. Moreover, the restrictions, runes, and structure of this magic treasure were extremely special. Even if time was accelerated, it would leave traces on it, thus changing its structure. This caused this magic treasure to be biased and lose the ability to be refined, changed, and turned into a magic treasure that was absolutely compatible with her. These two characteristics caused her to have to expel her own aura all the time if she wanted to refine this magic treasure, causing countless methods that could speed up the formation of this magic treasure to be unable to be used. Similarly, because time could not be accelerated, she could only grind this magic treasure bit by bit and raise the level of this magic treasure bit by bit. Normally speaking, to refine a magic treasure, there was a basic rule. Some time could be shortened, but some time had to be experienced no matter what. If one wanted to turn something into a half-step pseudosage treasure, or even a level 1 pseudosage treasure, the time needed would add up to at least hundreds of millions of years. Such a long time was actually not too long for a level 2 pseudosage existence. However, for those who needed to use this half-step pseudosage treasure or even level 1 pseudosage treasure to raise their cultivation realm, this period of time had obviously exceeded their endurance. It was precisely because of this. Hu Yun. Thus, he had no choice but to pay such a huge price in exchange for Luo Fan to help him refine a grade 1 pseudosage treasure. Seeing that Luo Fan had agreed, Hu Yun was overjoyed and didn't care about anything else. He raised his hand and stroked the air in front of him. In an instant, the gray light that enveloped the tens of thousands of worlds slowly shrank and turned into a cocoon of light that enveloped the tens of thousands of worlds. It landed in her hand and turned into a fist-sized pill. When the cocoon of light entered her hand, a hint of reluctance appeared in Hu Yun's eyes, but it was replaced by determination in the end. She handed the cocoon of light to Li Hao. Li Hao smiled faintly, took the cocoon of light, and directly put it into his universe within sleeve. He said, "Many thanks for your help, fellow Taoist." With that, he did not delay any further. With a thought, countless changes appeared in the demon realm, in this world, and even among the hundreds of millions of worlds in this world. In the end, the countless changes condensed in one place, causing a pillar-like thing to appear in his hand out of thin air. This thing was exactly the same as the half-step pseudosage treasure that he had given to Hu Yun previously. Obviously, it was in the form of the half-step pseudosage treasure. After this thing appeared, there was naturally an aura that belonged to the half-step pseudosage treasure. The supreme power swept across the sky and cleansed the void, causing the hundreds of millions of worlds in the void to instantly feel the sudden appearance of some great and noble existence. They felt an indescribable shock in their own nature. If Luo Fan used this method of using the second level of the law of causality outside, Hu Yun would naturally not be able to feel it because her cultivation realm was not high enough. However, this method that he was using now was in the world that Hu Yun had opened up, in a place that was completely under Hu Yun's control. All of these changes naturally couldn't escape her senses. In an instant, Hu Yun sensed the numerous extremely subtle changes that had occurred in the entire world, and she faintly knew that these changes contained boundless inconceivable profundities, and it might be related to the next step of her cultivation. However, although she knew this, she could not understand the mysteries. Even if she included all the changes in her senses, she was still at a loss in the end. She could not find the root of these changes at all, nor could she understand how these changes formed such incredible power that directly created the half-step pseudo-sage treasure in front of her. However, Luo Fan did not care about what she was thinking. Seeing that the half-step pseudo-sage treasure was formed, he smiled slightly. With a thought, countless more changes appeared between heaven and earth, in countless worlds, and in the entire demon realm. In the end, they gathered in one place and integrated into this half-step pseudo-sage treasure, causing the power of this treasure to increase again, and it was one step closer to the real pseudo-sage level. Of course, it was only one step closer. It was still far from the real pseudo-sage level. Luo Fan did not hesitate. If the first time did not work, he would do it the second time. If the second time did not work, he would do it the third time. He kept using the second level of the law of causality, using the power of the universe and the magical effect of the law of causality to push this half-step pseudo-sage treasure to the real pseudo-sage level. After doing this for more than 1,000 times, he felt a shock in his hand. The pill in his hand suddenly enlarged by 10 times, then shrank to 1/10 of its original size, and then enlarged to 10 times of its original size. After repeating this for a total of 81 times, it returned to its normal size. Then, an incomparably powerful aura that belonged to the pseudo-sage level soared into the sky from the pill, causing the entire world to shake violently. Even the many worlds in the void that acted as stars trembled slightly during this process, faintly showing signs of being unable to withstand the impact of this aura and becoming chaotic. Seeing this, Luo Fan had a thought, and the aura in the pill suddenly disappeared. It directly turned into the most ordinary pill. No special phenomenon appeared, and it did not cause any more abnormalities. At this time, Hu Yun finally reacted. She hurriedly sorted out the entire world and restored the many worlds that had been displaced to their normal positions. After everything was done, she looked at the seemingly ordinary pill lying in Luo Fan's hand in disbelief. Just now, she clearly sensed all the changes that occurred in the process of Luo Fan using the second level of the law of causality for more than 1,000 times. At least, in this world. She could clearly sense all the changes in the billions of worlds in the void. However, the more she sensed, the more confused she became. The more confused she was, the more incredible she was. All of these changes were meaningless in her eyes. They seemed to be changing for the sake of changing. However, that was what she could not understand. The changes that she could not understand at all eventually pushed a half-step pseudo-sage treasure to the pseudo-sage level so easily. Moreover, during this process, he did not violate any of the requirements that she had set, nor was he contaminated with any aura that she did not want to be contaminated with. This kind of inconceivable change almost toppled her worldview. It made her wonder if she had cultivated for hundreds of millions of years in the past for nothing. Was the person in front of her a real cultivator, and she had always been at the level of an ordinary mortal? How is this possible? It's just a realm difference. How can the difference be so huge? At this time, this was the only thought that echoed in her mind. Because of this thought, she did not reach out to take the pill in Luo Fan's hand for a while. Luo Fan did not know why she did this at first, but he soon figured it out. He could not help but smile and say, "Mr. Hu Yun, have you never come into contact with karma?" Karma? I know. All the actions and thoughts of all living beings will give rise to karma, causing living beings to be connected with other living beings. Eventually, when the karma accumulates, it may lead to extremely uncontrollable consequences, Hu Yun said after recovering from her thoughts. Luo Fan chuckled and did not deny it. He just said, "This is the level 1 pseudo-sage treasure that you wanted. Fortunately, I did not disappoint you." Hu Yun took the pill in Luo Fan's hand in a daze. She instinctively sensed the mystery of the pill, but she was obviously a little absent-minded. After a while, her eyes suddenly lit up, and she asked in surprise, "Could it be that what you used just now was a karma technique?" Luo Fan just chuckled, but did not speak, nor did he confirm her words. If he continued to speak, it would involve his cultivation. Given the friendship between him and Hu Yun, it was not enough for him to tell her the mystery of his cultivation. Being able to point out the cause and effect of her own methods was already an explanation for the bargain she had taken this time. As for whether she could comprehend it and how much she could comprehend, it all depended on Hu Yun herself. Although Hu Yun was very anxious and even had the thought of prying open Luo Fan's mouth and making Luo Fan answer her questions, she could only give up in the end. After all, it was up to him whether he would answer or not. She could not force him at all. If she really asked, it would only waste the little friendship that she had accumulated before, and it would not be worth it. After thinking about it, she could only sigh and apologize to Luo Fan for being rude. She then asked Luo Fan to leave this world. I wonder how that level 7 pseudo-sage existence was able to use the world he created in battle? On the way, Hu Yun forced herself to shift her thoughts away from the karma and asked another question that she was very concerned about. In her life, the thing that she was most interested in was opening up a world. It was also because of opening up a world that her combat ability was slightly weaker than ordinary level 2 pseudo-sage existences, even though she had reached the cultivation realm. This had actually become a sore point in her heart, and she was still brooding over it. Hearing Hu Yun's words, Luo Fan smiled and said, "That cultivator's methods are superb. Not only did he focus on many special worlds, but he could also open up many special worlds that were different from ordinary worlds at will. Furthermore, he integrated the ability to open up a world into his body, and he could even create a world just by exhaling. His methods are superb, but I was exhausted and couldn't control myself." Special world. Integrated the ability to open up a world into the world around him, and he could create a world just by exhaling. Hu Yun felt as if she had been struck by lightning and stood there in a daze. Many incredible words and images flashed in her eyes, and countless spiritual lights flickered. If any mortal saw the world in her eyes at this moment, they might not be able to withstand the impact of the complex changes. Even their mind would be shattered, and even their soul would be erased because of the many changes contained within. She actually comprehended it. It seems that she has been at the peak level 2 pseudo-sage for a long time. As soon as Luo Fan noticed the changes in Hu Yun, he couldn't help but be surprised, and he immediately made a guess in his heart. They were still in Hu Yun's world, and as Hu Yun fell into that state of confusion, the entire world seemed to be faintly shaking. This kind of shaking. However, it was different from the shaking when the half-step pseudo-sage treasure was formed, and the shaking when the level 1 pseudo-sage treasure was born. This kind of shaking seemed to come directly from the source of the world. It was directly produced by the entire world itself. It was born from the depths of the world. The shaking of the entire world became more and more intense as time passed. It was getting more and more obvious, and the appearance it produced was getting more and more obvious in Luo Fan's eyes. However, all the living beings and existences in the hundreds of millions of worlds felt nothing at all. To them, the entire world had not changed at all, and everything was exactly the same as before. During this shaking, Hu Yun's aura began to gradually break through the restrained state and began to sweep in all directions. This aura was the aura of a level 2 pseudo-sage peak. The power contained in it was strong enough to suppress any level 1 pseudo-sage to the point of losing themselves. However, to Luo Fan, such an aura was like a cool breeze. It only made him feel comfortable, but it did not bring him any impact. However, although these auras did not bring him any impact, Luo Fan still retreated quickly and appeared in the gap between this world and the demon realm. He was in a state where he was about to leave this world, but he had not completely left it. He stood there quietly and looked at Hu Yun. If Hu Yun only experienced such a change after he left, he naturally wouldn't care. However, at this time, she suddenly fell into such a state in the process of talking to him. Naturally, he couldn't just ignore it and leave directly. If that was the case, It would obviously be too ungentlemanly. Therefore, at this time, although his relationship with Hu Yun was not deep, he could only stay here to protect her. In that world, after Hu Yun's aura swept through every part of the world, it began to retract, and in an instant, it shrank into an area with a radius of billions of miles around her body. The aura of a level 2 pseudosage peak was strong enough to break through all obstacles. However, none of the living beings in this world that were like stars in the sky felt the change in this aura. It was not because the aura had penetrated deep into the source of the world, but because although the aura had enveloped these worlds, it had not seeped into them. It was as if Hu Yun still had a bit of instinct left in her to control her aura, preventing her aura from invading those worlds, causing those worlds to be affected by her aura, preventing the living beings in those worlds from being harmed by her aura. After the aura around Hu Yun's body was compressed to a radius of billions of miles, it began to undergo countless changes. Many mysterious worlds began to appear in her aura. There were many of these worlds, and all of them were extremely wonderful and strange. They vaguely looked like the tens of thousands of worlds that she had given to Luo Fan before, but they contained some of the feeling of the special worlds that Luo Fan had seen in the hands of the level 7 pseudosage. These worlds were born and destroyed as they were born, and in the aura area within a radius of billions of miles, they were like stars in the starry sky. Every time these worlds were born and destroyed, it was equivalent to the stars in the starry sky flickering. In other words, it was like the stars in the starry sky blinking. Every time the countless worlds were destroyed and reborn, their appearances would be slightly different from before. And every time there was a difference, it made the world move in a more wonderful direction that was even more beyond the scope of Luo Fan's understanding. Moreover, every time these worlds were born, the speed at which they were born would become faster than before. This went on for a long time. Suddenly, all the worlds were completely annihilated, and the aura that belonged to Hu Yun continued to shrink. The shrinking speed was so fast that in the blink of an eye, it had shrunk from a radius of billions of miles to a completely restrained state. At this moment, Hu Yun's body trembled slightly. In an instant, countless worlds were born all over her body. Around her skirt, between her fingers, around her hair, everything was wrapped up by the endless worlds. The tiny worlds around her body trembled continuously, and they were born and destroyed continuously. It seemed like she had become a figure formed by the accumulation of countless worlds. This kind of change lasted for a while before it stopped. Chapter 13:22. Impressively, although Hu Yun had obtained great benefits and even broke through the bottleneck between level 2 and level 3, she still needed to wait for an opportunity to truly step into the level 3 pseudo-sage realm. Of course, this opportunity was not the kind that she needed to wait for when she was stuck. Instead, it was a small opportunity that only needed a touch of the heart. This kind of opportunity could appear almost at any time. It might be in the next moment or a few years later. However, no matter what, because the biggest bottleneck had been broken through, this opportunity would come sooner or later. In other words, it was only a matter of time before he truly broke through and truly became a level 3 pseudo-sage. Although Hu Yun was in the midst of breaking through, she was very clear about everything around her. Naturally, she noticed Luo Fan's act of protecting her. She hurriedly came forward and bowed to Luo Fan. "Thank you for protecting me, fellow Taoist. You don't have to be so polite." Luo Fan smiled and waved his hand. "Since fellow Taoist has completed your breakthrough, I shall take my leave." "Fellow Taoist, please wait," Hu Yun said at this moment. This was the second time she said this after meeting Luo Fan. "Is there anything else, fellow Taoist?" Luo Fan smiled. "I have to repay the kindness of fellow Taoist for your guidance. I see that fellow Taoist is interested in strange worlds. There is a world here that I accidentally obtained, and I am willing to give it to fellow Taoist to thank you for your guidance," Hu Yun said. If it was anything else, Luo Fan naturally wouldn't care too much. However, she was talking about strange worlds now. Luo Fan was very curious and couldn't help but say, "It's not really a kindness, and I don't need fellow Taoists to repay me. However, I am really interested in the strange world that fellow Taoist mentioned, so I have to be thick-skinned to see it." Seeing this, Hu Yun's face lit up, and she said to Luo Fan, "Fellow Taoist, please wait a moment." Saying that, she didn't move at all, but the whole world began to change subtly. This kind of subtle change was extremely mysterious, and it spread across every inch of the world. It affected every rule and law in this world. It affected the billions of worlds in this world. Finally, amidst the changes, the void split open, and a beam of light appeared out of nowhere. He descended from the void. The landing point. It was in front of Hu Yun. Along with this beam of light, a strange sphere appeared from the source of the beam of light. It slowly descended from an unknown place in the void. Before long, he had already landed in front of Hu Yun. After the sphere fell, the beam of light flickered slightly and disappeared, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Hu Yun picked up the sphere and offered it to Meng Hao. "This is the world. Please accept it, fellow Taoists." Luo Fan smiled. After thanking Hu Yun, he raised his hand and took the sphere. As soon as the sphere entered his hand, he could not help but change his expression. There was a look of disbelief on his face. He seemed to not dare to believe his own judgment. With a thought, his perception directly enveloped the sphere, from the inside to the outside, and everything in that world was included in his perception. As his perception progressed, shock finally appeared on his face. He raised his head and looked at Hu Yun. He opened his mouth, but for a moment, he did not know what to say or what to do. After a while, he handed the sphere to Hu Yun and said, "This world is too precious. The little contribution I made to fellow Taoist is not worth this world at all. Fellow Taoist, you should put this world away. Also, I have a suggestion for fellow Taoist. It's best if fellow Taoist doesn't let other cultivators know about the existence of this world. Otherwise, it might bring about a disaster." Hu Yun's expression changed greatly when he heard that. Even the aura that he had concealed so well could not be concealed anymore. The slight fluctuation caused the entire world to tremble slightly. Seeing this, Luo Fan hurriedly raised his hand and covered the sphere in his hand. In an instant, time and space changed, and a golden world instantly enveloped the sphere. Everything within the sphere was instantly isolated from the outside world. In this situation, even if someone who recognized that world stood in front of him now, they would not be able to recognize it. This was the first time Luo Fan had used his method of opening a world in front of Hu Yun. It was this method that made Hu Yun's face and ears flush red. She felt extremely ashamed. Looking at the method Luo Fan used to open a world, it was many times more exquisite than hers. Even the world that he opened up, although it was just casually opened up, was already of an extremely high level. It was much more powerful than the world that she had spent thousands of years to open up herself, and it was this kind of existence that had just used a magic treasure to exchange a world with her. Yet she had taken it for granted and even felt a little proud. This was simply showing off in front of an expert. How could she not feel ashamed? How could she accept it indifferently? Luo Fan did not care how shocked Hu Yun was by his method of opening up a world. At this moment, he quietly sensed the world in his hand and found that the four basic existences of the world were all extremely powerful, and the structure was extremely tight. It was enough to completely conceal all information and make it difficult for any cultivator that he knew to pass through the barrier of this world. He only heaved a sigh of relief when he sensed that it was the sphere that existed in the world. "You must be careful, my friend. This thing is of great importance. Even a level 9 pseudo-sage existence would go crazy over it. If anyone knows that this thing is in your hands, no one will be able to save you," Luo Fan said solemnly. Seeing this, Hu Yun forced herself to calm down. However, she did not take the world in Luo Fan's hand. Instead, she said, "Since this thing is so precious, why don't you accept it?" Luo Fan frowned and said, "Didn't I say before that this thing is too precious? If it is my subordinate, I will feel guilty." "Don't worry, my friend. No matter how precious this thing is, since I have already given it to you, you are naturally my friend. Even if it is too precious, it is my business and has nothing to do with you. Why do you need to feel guilty?" Hu Yun became even more determined. Luo Fan looked at the world in his hand and his expression changed. In the end, he sighed and said, "It seems that if I don't explain clearly, you won't take it back. Fine, you first strengthen the world and use all methods you can to isolate all detection from the outside world. Then, I will explain to you what this world is." Hearing this, Hu Yun wanted to refute immediately, but in the end, she could not suppress her curiosity. She still wanted to know what was going on in that world, what mysteries it contained. Therefore, nodding, he raised his hand and made a hand seal. Countless worlds in that world trembled slightly, and rays of light were emitted from those worlds. In an instant, they poured into the void of the outside world. In an instant, the entire world was dyed in colorful colors. A strange world that was constantly changing. "My friend, please enter the world," Hu Yun said to Luo Fan at this time. Hearing this, Luo Fan knew that this change had most likely reached a place that would affect the gap between this world and the demon realm. Without hesitation, he stepped into that world. He came to Hu Yun's side. The movements of Hu Yun's hands became faster. At this time, the strange lights emitted from countless worlds seemed to have started to fuse. They gradually converged and melted. Unknowingly, all the colors disappeared. The entire world seemed to be covered by a strange, dusky fog. The strength of the world's space and the stability of time seemed to have suddenly increased by 10 times. He felt that even if he wanted to break through it, he would need to use many methods. Good method. Sensing this change, Luo Fan could not help but praise. Joy appeared on Hu Yun's face when she heard this praise. Clearly, she was quite proud of her method of using other worlds to strengthen this world. After a while, this change subsided, and the entire world returned to peace. However, Luo Fan faintly felt that his perception of the outside world had been weakened to the limit. It became faintly discernible, as if it had been cut off, but not completely cut off. Only when he sensed this did he feel a little relieved. The change that happened to this world just now was obviously external. The effect on the inside should be 1,000 times worse than the effect on the outside. However, the effect of the isolation on the inside had already reached such a degree. It could be imagined that if the cultivators outside wanted to investigate the situation in this world, it would obviously be even more difficult, even close to impossible. It was really dangerous just now. Luo Fan sighed. "I wonder why fellow friend was so cautious?" Hu Yun said. Luo Fan looked at Hu Yun, and his face could not help but have a rather strange expression. Seeing this, Hu Yun was even more puzzled. After a while, Luo Fan said, "Your luck is so good that I have never seen anything like it in my life. Why are you still a level 2 pseudo-sage cultivator?" How could Hu Yun expect Luo Fan to suddenly say such a thing? For a moment, she did not know how to react. Luo Fan sighed. Without waiting for Hu Yun's answer, he threw the world in his hand forward. The golden sphere changed slightly and gradually became transparent. As the world became transparent, the strange sphere that was wrapped in the world, the source of Luo Fan's shock, began to slowly disintegrate and gradually turned into a world. That world was boundless. In the center of it there were 4 vast continents. However, these 4 continents were still extremely small areas in the entire world. Outside these 4 continents was a boundless ocean and an endless number of islands. In the entire world, the rules and laws were completely in line with the Great Tao. The aura of the entire world was neutral and peaceful, but contained a strong sense of destruction, Among the 4 continents and the many islands, there were no living beings with born Taoism aptitudes at all. There were only all kinds of strange and powerful beasts. It was already very obvious what kind of world such a world was. It was obviously the primordial world, a world that was regarded as a treasure by a level 9 pseudo-sage Buddhist supreme. It was an existence that was regarded as his lifetime inheritance, and a world that was regarded as the key to open the door to the Holy Land. This was also the reason why Luo Fan had such an unusual reaction when he sensed this world. Although such a primordial world was not too tempting to Luo Fan, one could imagine how precious it was. In fact, if there was a level 9 pseudo-sage existence, they would probably be willing to exchange everything they had for it. If such an existence was known by outsiders or level 9 pseudo-sage existences, misfortune would definitely follow. Even if it was Luo Fan himself, he would probably be overwhelmed to death by the many level 9 pseudo-sage existences after he obtained this world, let alone the level 2 pseudo-sage Hu Yun. Even Taoist Bei Shi and Taoist Shen Gui. If the 2 of them knew that Luo Fan possessed this primordial world, they would definitely fall out and snatch it. They would definitely turn hostile immediately and snatch it. There was absolutely no reason to reason with them. It was because of this consideration that Luo Fan was so nervous and cautious just now. This is the primordial world. It's the primordial world, Luo Fan sighed. Primordial world? What is a primordial world? Could it be the beginning of all worlds? Speaking of worlds, Hu Yun had forgotten everything else. She asked curiously. As someone who had an extraordinary obsession with the world, she had been continuously opening and creating worlds since the Khanate Daluo realm. She had not stopped until now. Of course, it was impossible for Hu Yun to be indifferent to a world that she had never heard of. Luo Fan could not help but smile bitterly and said, "Primordial world is just a name, it's not important at all. If you want, you can even name it Little Black or Little White. The most important thing is the use of this world, the meaning of this world." Hu Yun could not help but feel a little dissatisfied. Her obsession with the world was beyond imagination. Luo Fan's indifference to the name of the world was obviously not in line with her values. However, she also knew that not everyone was like her, so she did not say much. She only asked, "What is the use of this world? Why are you so nervous?" Luo Fan sighed and said, "This world has one of the greatest uses, and that is to give cultivators a chance. A chance that any cultivator dreams of." What chance? Hu Yun suddenly felt her heart beating faster. She faintly felt that what Luo Fan was going to say next would probably make her unable to control herself. As expected, Luo Fan said, "The chance to become a saint." The chance to become a saint? Hu Yun could not help but repeat. Her voice unknowingly became sharp and high-pitched, and she instantly lost control of her own power, causing the sound waves she spat out to instantly turn into a world. It was only after a long while that they dissipated and disappeared without a trace. It was even to the extent that her aura instantly broke through the barrier of her body and formed a vast universe around her. As it changed, it revealed all sorts of unimaginably peculiar sceneries. Sometimes it was like a lightning hell, and sometimes it was like a flaming heaven. These changes lasted for a long time before they disappeared along with the destruction of the sound wave world. Even at this moment, Hu Yun was still very excited. Her face was red as she said, "Impossible." Luo Fan casually pushed the world towards Hu Yun. Seeing the world floating towards her, Hu Yun did not have time to think. She instinctively caught the world. It was as if she had caught something extremely fragile and precious. It was a world of difference compared to the casual attitude she had towards the world before. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You will have to judge for yourself. However, I believe that as long as there is this rumor, it is enough for anyone to make a move against you. Therefore, you should try your best to keep this world. Luo Fan sighed. Hearing this, Hu Yun's expression kept changing. She wanted to push the world back to Luo Fan, but her hands felt heavy as if they were sealed by the world. No matter how hard she tried, she could not push it. That was for sure. What did cultivators cultivate for? Wasn't it to transcend? Wasn't it to be eternal? Wasn't it to not be destroyed? If it was an ordinary cultivator, they might have other goals such as revenge, pursuing power, and living a brilliant life. However, for those who could cultivate to the pseudo-sage realm, which one of them did not regard the goal of eternal life as their life's goal? Even if Hu Yun had an extraordinary obsession with the world, she was no exception. With such a mentality, a chance to become a sage was placed in front of her. Even if it was just a rumor that she had no idea whether it was true or not, it was almost impossible for her to push it out. At this moment, Luo Fan quietly watched the changes in Hu Yun's expression and guessed what she would do. Will she directly leave this primordial world behind and make me stay here? He thought quietly. He could already predict that if Hu Yun wanted to leave this primordial world, then the second thing she would do would definitely be to fall out with him. She would directly gather the power of the entire world, or even billions of worlds, to kill him on the spot so that he would not be able to expose the fact that this thing was in her hands. This was not difficult to speculate. If Hu Yun wanted to keep the chance to become a sage, she would naturally have to eliminate all future troubles. She would not let anyone know that this thing was in her hands. Even if there was a slight chance that it would be exposed, she would not let it go. Obviously, even if Luo Fan had personally pushed this opportunity into her hands just now, she still wouldn't be able to completely rest assured. This was the mentality of a normal living being. Even a pseudo-sage would not be able to avoid such a mentality. Luo Fan watched quietly and waited for the almost inevitable result. Chapter 1323. Hu Yun struggled for a while before she gradually calmed down. After that, she made a choice that surprised Luo Fan. She actually pushed the world in her hand towards Luo Fan and said, "Since I've already promised to give this primeval world to you, it naturally belongs to you. No matter how precious this primeval world is, it won't change this fact." As she spoke, her aura fluctuated, and the aura of a level 3 pseudo-sage was silently emitted from her body. At the same time, Hu Yun looked completely different from before, as if her essence had improved by countless times. Impressively, because of this difficult choice, she had broken through the realm that she originally needed a long time to break through. She broke through the shackles of a level 2 pseudo-sage and truly became a level 3 pseudo-sage, setting foot on the third step of the 9 steps below the sage realm. Feeling this, Luo Fan's original doubts about whether she was testing him or not had completely disappeared. To be able to make a breakthrough in one's cultivation realm because of a single choice, such a choice would definitely be an incomparably conflicted choice. The result of such a choice would definitely be an incomparably painful result. Only then would the ripples in her heart and the conflict in her heart be able to make a breakthrough in her cultivation realm. If Hun Yun's choice had not been sincere and had only been a test, then she would not have been able to achieve such a breakthrough. At this time, she should still be a level 2 pseudo-sage. Now that she had become a level 3 pseudo-sage, there was no need to find out whether she was sincere or not. He could directly confirm that she was really going to give up this primeval world and the chance to become a sage. After understanding this, Luo Fan did not accept the world. He just looked at Hu Yun with an inexplicable gaze. This was not a choice that an ordinary cultivator could make. Even though Luo Fan had just said it casually, there was no evidence to prove that this world was really a chance to become a sage. There was no evidence to prove that this world really was a chance to become a sage. However, when a normal cultivator heard such a rumor, they would not care whether it was true or not. As long as there was a 1 in a billion chance, they would definitely do everything they could to obtain it. Not to mention that this thing originally belonged to him. Even if it wasn't, he would definitely do everything he could to obtain it. They would definitely pay any price to snatch it. After a while, Hu Yun's aura calmed down and returned to her body. His entire body returned to its original appearance, but a faint smile appeared on his face. Naturally, she could sense the changes in her body many times more clearly than Luo Fan. He broke through the limit of his cultivation realm. Stepping into a realm that she had always dreamed of was simply proof to her that the choice she had made before was correct. Therefore, her expression became even more determined. I hope you will accept this primordial world. When Luo Fan saw this, he sighed in admiration and said, to be able to resist this kind of temptation, it's very impressive. Fellow Taoists' abilities are truly amazing. I might as well. Hu Yun let out a faint smile and calmly said, not many people can do it. How can you take back what you've given away? Not everyone can do it? Luo Fan merely chuckled and repeated himself. He didn't say anything else. However, his meaning was already very clear, and there was no need for any more words to explain. However, even at this point, Luo Fan didn't accept the idea that this was a primordial world. Though a primordial world like this was mysterious and was known as a chance to become a saint and was unimaginably valuable, to Luo Fan, who had already seen through its uses, it really wasn't that tempting. More importantly, he already had a primordial world like this. Under these circumstances, this primordial world was just icing on the cake. At most, it would just be the icing on the cake. Its only use was to strengthen the power of the primordial world that he originally possessed. That would only bring him a little bit of benefit. But the drawbacks were giving him a huge headache. Unless he kills Hu Yun, the fact that he had this primordial world will be known by others one day. In fact, Hu Yun might not have revealed it unintentionally. Instead, she might have spread it herself. In the future, Hu Yun would spread the fact that he had a primordial world. There was no contradiction between the fact that Hu Yun sincerely wanted to give this primordial world to Luo Fan. The human heart was constantly changing. Hu Yun truly wanted to give this primordial world to Luo Fan and abide by her original agreement. However, as time passed, what happened today would forever be engraved in the depths of her memory. From time to time, it would appear and remind her that she had once obtained such a chance to become a saint. Perhaps she wouldn't feel too much for a short period of time. In fact, she might even feel proud of herself for being able to resist such a temptation. However, as time went on and she recalled it more and more, her mentality would gradually change. Her original pride would gradually turn into disapproval, and in the end, it would even turn into regret. In particular, in the future, her cultivation would inevitably once again fall into a bottleneck, and she would not be able to find any direction to break through. At that time, the scene that happened today would become incomparably profound, and in the end, she would regret it to the extreme. At that time, her feelings towards Luo Fan would change from gratitude to hatred. At that time, it was very clear that she would search for Luo Fan and spread the news that he owned this primordial world. Luo Fan could see this development very clearly. If he didn't have a primordial world, then it would be fine. It would not be difficult for him to seize this primordial world and conveniently wipe out Hu Yun. However, he already had a primordial world. Moreover, he had completely refined the world of hope and fused it with him. In comparison, how could this new primordial world be considered anything? For the sake of such a useless primordial world, it was worth it to wipe out a cultivator that he somewhat admired, or to bear the betrayal that would almost certainly come in the future. Because of this consideration, Luo Fan had no interest in this primordial world at all. Therefore, even though he knew that Hu Yun was sincerely giving this primordial world to him, he only smiled faintly. He raised his hand and pushed the primordial world back. This world is too precious. I can't accept it. Don't worry, fellow Taoist. I'm definitely sincere. Fellow Taoist, please accept this item, Hu Yun said firmly. She pushed the primordial world towards Luo Fan again. If the level, 9 pseudo-sages saw what they were doing, they would definitely be so furious that they would use all their strength to completely wipe them out. One had to know that they were even willing to give up everything they had in exchange for a primordial world like this. Yet, it was being pushed around by 2 existences that they viewed as ant. That was truly a reckless waste of resources, however. Whether it was Luo Fan or Hu Yun, they did not care what they thought. Between the 2 of them, one was doing it for the persistence in his heart, while the other did not want to cause trouble in the future. However, neither of them was willing to leave this primordial world. After a while, Luo Fan said, "I will never accept this primordial world. I definitely won't accept it. If fellow Taoist doesn't accept it, then I'll be leaving." As soon as Hu Yun saw Luo Fan's appearance, she knew how resolute he was. Her expression couldn't help but change. She didn't know whether to push the world or not. She fell into a dilemma. Could Luo Fan break through the many defenses of her primordial world and leave? She did not doubt this at all. Although she was already a level 3 pseudo-sage, she had only just broken through. Not long ago, she was only a level 2 pseudo-sage cultivator. Even though she had become a level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator, she was still unfamiliar with the power and realm that she possessed. It was easy to imagine how much strength she could exert. If she were to face Luo Fan, who had been in the level 3 pseudo-sage for an unknown period of time, even with the help of this primordial world, she did not have much confidence that she could make him stay. If she were to directly accept this primordial world, as Luo Fan had said, it would go against her insistence, and she was naturally unwilling to do so. This dilemma caused Hu Yun's expression to change. She was at a loss as to what to do. Seeing this, Luo Fan chuckled and said, "If fellow Taoist feels bad, why don't you tell me how you obtained this primordial world? Perhaps there is still a primordial world there, and I will take it myself. That way, there won't be any psychological pressure." Hu Yun frowned and said, "This thing is so precious, how can there be so many? I obtained this primordial world there, so of course there can't be such a primordial world there." This was originally just an excuse for Luo Fan. He did not believe that there was still a primordial world in the place where Hu Yun took this primordial world. However, although this was what he thought, in order to maintain this excuse, he obviously could not say it. Therefore, he smiled and said, "That's not necessarily true. Since you were able to obtain such a primordial world there, are you sure that the primordial world is the deepest part and the most precious thing there? Perhaps you have overlooked some places, and there might be other things in the deeper parts. If you tell me, maybe I can obtain more and better things than this primordial world. Haha. This is just a small thought of mine. Fellow Taoist, you won't refuse, right?" Hearing this, Hu Yun said, "There is no problem telling fellow Taoist where that place is. However, fellow Taoist must have a subordinate for this primordial world. If fellow Taoist says this again, I don't even want to hear where that place is. I'll just turn around and leave." Luo Fan frowned. These words caused Hu Yun, who was about to continue speaking, to immediately stop. She simply couldn't say anything else. After a while, she put away the primordial world with a conflicted expression and said, "Thank you for fulfilling my wish. This is yours to begin with." "What are you talking about, fulfilling my wish? This is really funny." Seeing that she finally put away the source of her trouble, Luo Fan finally smiled. Hu Yun smiled bitterly. How could she not know why Luo Fan made that request? However, since the 2 of them were so insistent, there would be no result even if she continued to pester them. She might as well go with the flow. After thinking for a while, Hu Yun raised her hand and clapped. Instantly, a world was born in front of her. This world was not a high-level one. It only looked like a small kiliacosm. However, the entire world was extremely vast. It was unknown how many light years it covered. The scene inside was a boundless ocean. Only in the various parts of the ocean could there be a single person. Everywhere in the ocean was dotted with tiny islands. Compared to other normal worlds, this world was extremely strange. The entire world seemed to have no time, or perhaps time was completely stagnant. Everything inside was eternally motionless. Even if it was a gust of wind, a drop of water, or even a cloud, there was no possibility for them to move. The entire world was like a three-dimensional picture. After opening up this world, Hu Yun casually pointed at a certain part of the void in that world, and a dot of red light flickered there. After doing this, Hu Yun pushed the world to the front. She pushed it in front of Luo Fan and said, that is where I found this primitive world." Luo Fan took the world. With a slight sense, he clearly sensed everything in the world. He could not help but show a look of admiration on his face. "Very good map." "That's right. This world was actually a map. It was extremely detailed. The marked area was a map of the tens of thousands of seas around Chun Gong Island in the Demon Realm. Everything on the map was consistent with everything in the tens of thousands of seas in the Demon Realm. Even the situation on each island was clearly displayed. As long as Luo Fan locked his perception on a certain location, a lot of information about that location would flow into his heart through his perception, and he would easily know where it was. In comparison, such a map, any map that Luo Fan had seen in the past, was completely rubbish. With a thought, he locked his perception on the place where the red dot was flashing. Luo Fan instantly sensed that there were countless layers of restrictions and countless layers of spacetime. Amidst the layers of spacetime, an incomparably complex and strange place was outlined. It was like a battlefield, a relic, and more like a trap. That place doesn't seem simple. Maybe I can go and take a look when I have time. After seeing everything clearly, Luo Fan was secretly interested. However, it was just a thought. Although he was interested in exploring that place, it was not a big deal. If he passed by it in the future, he might go and explore it. However, he was not interested in going there specifically, at least for now. "You flatter me." Hu Yun smiled faintly. Luo Fan chuckled. With a pat of his hand, the world turned into a scroll and was put into the universe in his sleeve. It was not difficult for cultivators above the sage-to-be stage to transform the world into something else. It was even easier for cultivators at Luo Fan's level. "Alright, let's call it a day. We'll meet again in the future." Luo Fan smiled faintly and said, "You've helped me a lot today, but I'm not able to repay you." "I'm really ashamed," Hu Yun said shamefully. As she spoke, the seal on the world disappeared completely. The grayish color that shrouded the entire world split into countless rays of light and returned to the billions of worlds. At this moment, Luo Fan felt that his perception of Chun Gong Island had regained its original clarity. He felt like he could leave this world at any time if he wanted to. Sensing this, he knew that Hu Yun had let go of all the obstacles. He could not help but smile and say, "What's there to be ashamed of? I didn't do anything. However, before I leave, I have to give you a reminder." "I'm all ears." Hu Yun was startled for a moment before she said solemnly. Due to Luo Fan's previous actions, she had long admired Luo Fan. Therefore, when she heard Luo Fan's reminder, she naturally attached great importance to it. Luo Fan said calmly, "After we part ways, you'd better leave Chun Gong Island as soon as possible. The further, the better. The more hidden, the better. Don't stay for even a moment. It's best if you abandon your original cave abode and go to another place where no one knows about you. Completely conceal yourself and don't come into contact with anyone." "Ah, you're right. I hope you can leave your aura behind. When I settle down in the future, I'll let you know so that I can keep in touch with you." Hu Yun said solemnly with a shocked expression. "Leave my aura behind?" Luo Fan wore a faint smile and said, "Do you know why I asked you to leave immediately? Isn't it to prevent others from knowing that I have that thing?" Hu Yun was startled and said, now that she no longer sealed off this world, it was naturally inappropriate for her to mention the primordial world to prevent its existence from being leaked. "Of course, that's part of the reason. However, more importantly, you have to be on guard against another person," Luo Fan said with a faint smile. His expression made Hu Yun's hair stand on end. She carefully asked, "Who are you talking about?" "The person you have to be on guard against is me," Luo Fan said with a smile. Hu Yun was stunned by his words. She then laughed and said, "Why do you have to scare me? You had such a good opportunity to obtain that thing, but you didn't take it. Why should I be on guard against you?" Chapter 1324. After Luo Fan left, Hu Yun stood there blankly for a while. Then, her entire body trembled, and a disappointed expression appeared on her face. Is that really the case? As she thought about it, all kinds of messy thoughts directly drowned her. She actually wanted to tell herself that things would not be like this, that such a thing would definitely not happen. However, as soon as she thought about it, she realized that she could not convince herself at all. Not to mention that she and Luo Fan had just met, even she herself could not be sure that she would still maintain such thoughts after so many years. At this moment, when she recalled her thoughts when she handed over the primordial world to Luo Fan, she suddenly understood why Luo Fan was unwilling to accept her handing over the primordial world to him. So, he was worried that I would change my mind in the future, regret my decision today, and bring trouble to him instead. No wonder. Hu Yun sighed, and her expression became even more bitter. She still wanted to loudly say that Luo Fan's worries were wrong, that such a thing would never happen. However, deep down in her heart, she faintly knew that such a thing was very likely to happen. After a few years, when she recalled her decision today, it was very likely that she would regret it. At that time, with her mentality, it was very likely that she would have endless hatred for Luo Fan. This is human nature. Even if one has already cultivated to this stage, it is still impossible to avoid this kind of human nature. Hu Yun let out a long sigh, and did not leave this world. With a single thought, the world shook slightly. It instantly turned into nothingness. It had directly left the Devil Realm. Of course, although it had left the Devil Realm, it was not completely independent. Instead, it existed in a form similar to the vast thousand worlds that Luo Fan and the other sects of the Azure Temple had been to before. It was located in an extremely mysterious place. This kind of existence was the kind of existence that could only be possessed by a relatively high-level world. A world created by an ordinary cultivator would not be able to achieve this. Just by being able to transfer the world to this state, it was enough to show the depth of Hu Yun's control over the world. And at this time, she used such a method to move the world away. Obviously, she had really listened to Luo Fan's words. He really did as Luo Fan said. In fact, even if she had the ability to transform the world into that mysterious state, she could not do it for long. It was impossible for her to treat that state as the normal state of the world's existence. However, it only took an instant to enter that state. This was enough for Hu Yun to enter any place in the demon realm with the help of the special state of that world. Of course, at least in theory. In fact, Hu Yun's own knowledge and experience had limited the display of this power. She could only move to places that she had been to before, places that she was familiar with, but she couldn't really do as she pleased. Luo Fan strolled leisurely on Gong Island. He had sensed the change in Hu Yun's world. His expression changed slightly, and he sighed. What a pity, however, no one knew what he was feeling regretful about. Sighing, he continued to wander around Gong Island. A few days later, while he was wandering, he came to an ordinary-looking but extremely spacious building. This seems to be an auction house. Luo Fan's heart skipped a beat. After thinking for a while, he directly walked into the building. This building wasn't built in an ordinary mortal place, so naturally, there weren't any guards here. This place was used to receive cultivators who could easily destroy the world. Unless there was a sufficiently powerful cultivator guarding the door, it would be meaningless. If someone wanted to break in, they could still easily break in. Obviously, the existence of pseudo-saint level was proud. How could they be so humiliated as to serve as a door guard? In that case, there was naturally no need to do anything unnecessary. However, although there were no guards, after entering the door, there was an inexplicable suppressive force that appeared out of nowhere, acting on any cultivator who entered the building through the door. This suppressive force was extremely strange and powerful. Even Luo Fan was extremely shocked. Under this vast suppressive force, Luo Fan even felt that if he wanted to use his divine ability, he would need to expend tens of thousands of times more energy than before. If even he was in such a state, one could imagine how it would be for others. Sensing the suppressive force, Luo Fan instantly knew that this should be a method set up by the pseudo-saint Venerate of Chun Gong Island. This method might not be very effective, but it was enough to remind any cultivator who entered this building that this was the territory of a powerful pseudo-saint that could suppress everyone. If anyone dared to be presumptuous, they would have to bear the consequences themselves. After sensing this change, Luo Fan put this aside and directly walked into the lobby. The interior of this building was much larger than it looked from the outside. Moreover, the entire interior of the building was actually a void. There was a relatively large platform in the middle of the void that was the size of a football field, and there were thousands of smaller platforms densely packed around it. These platforms floated in the void, floating and sinking at the same time. It was an extremely mystical sight. Below the platforms, there wasn't any ground, nor was there any scenery like the surface of the sea. Instead, there was nothing but absolute emptiness and pitch-black darkness. This auction seemed to be auctioning something at this moment. On the huge platform in the center, a greater tier quasi-sage was introducing a strange creature that looked like a long snake. Although this creature was lying there as if it was dead, its essence was extremely high. Luo Fan could vaguely sense that its body contained a power comparable to that of a pseudo-saint. There's actually a pseudo-saint snake that hasn't transformed? What's the secret behind this? Luo Fan could not help but be surprised when he saw the creature. A pseudo-saint creature might be very strong, but it was still considered normal. When it reached a certain level, it was not rare. At least, it was still considered normal. At the very least, there were hundreds of people in this auction at this moment. However, a pseudo-saint creature still maintained its original form and did not transform into a born Taoism body. It did not even look like a creature with much intelligence. This was something that Luo Fan had never seen before. At this moment, he suddenly saw such a strange creature in front of him. Luo Fan could not help but be interested. Luo Fan entered. As if he had triggered some sort of rule of the auction house, a strange platform materialized under his feet and carried him into the thousands of platforms. He seemed to be floating between the thousands of platforms. There was a table on this platform. It was a very comfortable table. It was a very grand chair, and there were countless melons, fruits, and fine wine on the table. The service was far more perfect than one could imagine. Coming here, one could really say that one felt at home for such a change. Luo Fan's eyes flickered and he accepted it calmly. To mortals, such a method was naturally unimaginably mysterious and was definitely the work of an immortal. However, to him, it was nothing special. What was there to be surprised about? Sitting on the grand chair, the voice of the great accomplishment quasi-sage on the central platform became several times clearer than usual. Even the strange snake she was introducing became much clearer. Just as Luo Fan sat down, a cultivator made a bid for the strange snake. Of course, although it was a bid, it was still a barter. It was similar to the outside world, and there was no real equivalent to measure the value of the item. A look of hesitation appeared on the woman's face. She seemed to feel that the item offered by the bidder did not match the value of the strange snake. As such, she could not decide to exchange the strange snake with the item offered by the bidder. Soon, another person made a bid. In the end, the great accomplishment quasi-sage made a comparison and seemed to communicate with someone somewhere. Then, she decided to exchange the strange snake with the item offered by the bidder. It's quite an interesting way of auction, but only if both sides of the auction are powerful cultivators would they be able to use this method of auction. In the mortal world, how could it be done to this step? Luo Fan understood the trading method of the auction and couldn't help but sigh. Next, the great accomplishment quasi-sage waved her hand, and another item appeared on the platform. Then, there was a torrent of praises just like that. One auction item after another was taken out. Most of them were creatures of all kinds, while the rest were treasures, elixirs, magic arts, and so on. Among the many auction items, most of them were sold successfully, but there were also many that were not sold. Either no one bid for them, or the items offered by the bidders were not enough to satisfy the auction house, so they were not sold. However, even if the item was not sold, neither the auctioneer nor anyone else reacted strangely. It was as if this was nothing out of the ordinary. This was actually quite normal. How could it be so easy to find an exchange that would satisfy both parties when it came to bartering? Naturally, there were many items that neither party was satisfied with. It was only natural for such an auction to be left unsold. Luo Fan didn't participate in this process. Among the auction items, even if there were many treasures that were extremely valuable, he didn't feel anything for them. He didn't feel anything. Not many of them had any desires. Since he didn't have any desires, he naturally wouldn't waste his time looking for something of equal value to exchange for it. As a matter of fact, he did not come to this auction house to obtain anything specific. His real purpose for coming here was to see how auctions were conducted on Chengong Island, and also to see what was being auctioned here. After a few days, Luo Fan felt that he had gained a lot. An auction in the mortal world would only last a few hours at most, but for the cultivation world, it was impossible for it to be so short. It was normal for auctions to last a few days, months, or even years. Not only did he understand how the auctions in the cultivation world worked, but he also understood what the cultivators in the devil realm thought was the most valuable thing. So it's magic treasures. The most valuable things in the devil realm. So it's magic treasures. After a few days, Luo Fan's eyes lit up as he thought to himself. What he saw and heard in the past few days made him very clear on this point. Over the past few days, thousands of items were auctioned. Among them, there were 700 to 800 items that were not sold because the auctioneer wasn't satisfied with the price. However, there wasn't a single item that was left unsold. Cultivators had taken out magic treasures to exchange for it. That was to say, generally speaking, as long as the cultivator took out a magic treasure to exchange for it, almost every exchange would be successful. Even if the greater mastery quasi-sage indicated that the value of the item was much higher than the magic treasure, most of the transactions were successful. This situation was enough to show that the devil realm, the most important thing, it was magic treasures. With a thought in his mind, an inexplicable thought appeared in Luo Fan's mind. With a thought, countless changes occurred in the entire devil realm. In the end, he pointed at a spot in the void in front of him. In the blink of an eye, a dazzling golden ball condensed there. The aura of a half-step pseudo-sage treasure was emitted from the ball, but it was quickly suppressed by the powerful and vast suppressive force in the auction house. It didn't leak out at all. As expected, Luo Fan was not surprised by such a change. Then, with another thought, countless changes occurred. Amidst the many changes, the half-step pseudo-sage treasure that had just been born in front of him. This caused the half-step pseudo-sage treasure to vibrate slightly, and its level continued to rise. In this way, after thousands of times, this half-step pseudo-sage treasure broke through the shackles of the half-step pseudo-sage level and truly stepped into the level of a level 1 pseudo-sage. When this magic treasure reached the level 1 pseudo-sage level, Luo Fan stopped. This magic treasure was refined by Luo Fan according to the method of refining magic treasures given by Hu Yun. It did not carry any aura of the refiner, and could be completely refined by any living creature or cultivator. Moreover, it was a magic treasure that was refined step by step from the simplest materials, just like a magic treasure that he had refined from scratch. If such a magic treasure was obtained by any half-step pseudo-sage cultivator, they could use it to become a pseudo-sage in a very short period of time. It could be said that this magic treasure was not just a magic treasure, but a hope to become a pseudo-sage. After refining this magic treasure, Luo Fan thought in his mind, and the platform naturally changed. A small teleportation platform appeared in front of him. There were many words on the platform which recorded how to participate in the auction. This was actually the biggest source of auction items in this auction. Otherwise, with the financial resources of the auction house, no matter how rich it was, it would not be able to casually take out so many items that could attract the attention of pseudo-sage and quasi-sage existences. Only by letting the participants of the auction take out some items to auction could the auction house continue to operate for a long time. As for the commission of the auction house itself, compared to other places, it did not have that. After all, if there was no general equivalent, how could it take a commission? However, even if there was no commission, there was no need to worry that the auction house would not gain anything. In fact, for a true cultivator, material gains were secondary. The truly precious gains were the growth of insight and the harvest of knowledge. For the auction house, getting to know and see these auction items at a close distance was already a great gain for them. Since the participants of the auction had to provide the auction items, the design of the platform naturally had corresponding arrangements. This platform that appeared according to his will was one of those arrangements. Luo Fan glanced at the words and instantly understood the use of this platform. He smiled faintly and placed the Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure in front of him on the teleportation platform. Then, he casually left some information on the magic treasure and activated the magical function of the teleportation platform. The magic treasure instantly disappeared in front of him. At the same time, the major accomplishment quasi-sage on the platform seemed to have sensed something, and a look of surprise flashed across her face. However, she quickly returned to normal and continued with the auction that she had just been carrying out. On the surface, this auction was no different from the previous one. However, this great perfection quasi-sage seemed to be in a hurry. Very soon, he sold the auction item at a lower price than usual. As the auction item disappeared, the platform that was the size of a football field shone brightly and a golden sphere appeared on the platform. This sphere was shining with golden light and emitted an extremely strong aura that belonged to a Grade 1 pseudo-sage. It was the Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure that Luo Fan had just refined. She actually attaches so much importance to this magic treasure. It seems like the refining method of the magic treasure that Hu Yun obtained back then is quite mysterious. Luo Fan thought to himself with a faint smile on his face. He was not surprised that the Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure could emit such a strong aura on the central platform, but not a trace of aura was emitted from the platform he was on. Chapter 1325. This magic treasure is a Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure that a guest submitted just now. Although it's only a Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure, its value far surpasses that of a Grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure. The great accomplishment quasi-sage explained endlessly on the platform. She was originally a beautiful woman. Now that she was so excited and nervous that her face was flushed, the degree of her beauty had at least doubled. If there was an ordinary person here and they saw her appearance, they might be so infatuated by her beauty that they would lose themselves. However, there were no ordinary people here. Even the weakest cultivator was a sage to be. Naturally, they would not act too differently just because of her appearance. What they were concerned about was why the great accomplishment quasi-sage was so excited. A Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure was comparable to a Grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure. This was probably not something that could be made under ordinary circumstances. This definitely meant that this magic treasure was extremely special, enough for a knowledgeable great accomplishment quasi-sage to say such a thing. Under such circumstances, everyone was paying attention to what the great accomplishment quasi-sage was about to say. The great accomplishment quasi-sage suppressed her excitement and said, "That's right. Guests, you didn't hear wrongly. This judgment was not made by me, but by the appraisers of our auction house." His words caused everyone to focus their attention on him. They were even more concerned about what she was about to say next. "I think some guests already know what kind of magic treasure this is." "That's right. This magic treasure is an embryonic magic treasure. After being refined by any cultivator, it will become a magic treasure that is completely compatible with the cultivator. It will not have any aura of the refiner or any remnant of the refiner's cultivation technique." The major completion quasi-sage said loudly. For some reason, there was an indescribable thirst in her voice. Her words also allowed everyone to understand why this woman was so emotional. Although she was an auctioneer of the auction house, and was experienced and knowledgeable, she had another identity. However, she had another identity. She was a great accomplishment quasi-sage. A quasi-sage who had yet to set foot on the 9 steps below the sage stage. She was facing difficulties in becoming a pseudo-sage. Under such circumstances, this embryonic magic treasure that could allow any half-step holy transformation cultivator to break through to the holy transformation stage was placed right in front of her, and it was extremely tempting to her. It was easy to imagine. It was no wonder that she was so excited. It's indeed worthy of a grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure. A leisurely sigh was heard at this moment. Then, the shadow of a magic treasure appeared on the central platform. It was a magic treasure that looked like a triangular flag. As the flag fluttered, space-time ripples swirled around it, faintly discernible. There seemed to be countless illusory worlds taking form within it, yet they were destroyed at the instant they were unable to completely reveal their truth. Such a cycle repeated over and over again, and it seemed extremely miraculous. At the same time, a powerful aura spread from the platform and shrouded the entire auction house. This aura was tens of thousands of times stronger than the level 1 pseudo-sage treasure refined by Luo Fan that was released by the great accomplishment quasi-sage. It had even distorted the void, changed time, and caused the laws of the universe to slightly shift. This was the aura of a grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure. The existence of such an aura clearly meant that the magic treasure shadow was a real grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure. Only a level 5 pseudo-holy treasure like this could release such a terrifying level 5 pseudo-holy aura. "I'm willing to exchange this grade 5 pseudo-sage world flag for this grade 1 pseudo-sage embryonic magic treasure." The voice that praised the value of this magic treasure was comparable to a grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure sounded. Right at this moment another voice resounded. "This time, I can't give it to you, fellow Taoists." Following that, the shadow of a seal appeared on the platform. Facing the world flag from afar, the seal was emitting a green light. There seemed to be countless shadows of living beings being born and destroyed. At the same time, there was also an aura of a level 5 pseudo-sage level being exuded from the treasure, crushing the treasure of the world flag. This caused the originally calm auction space to become turbulent, and all kinds of strange lights and shadows flashed in the void. There seemed to be countless worlds in these lights and shadows, and there seemed to be countless living beings in these worlds. However, these living beings were not born from these worlds. Instead, they seemed to be thrown into these worlds by the enemies of these worlds. As soon as they were born, they began to destroy crazily, as if they were simply enemies of the world. Among the countless worlds, there were some worlds that were powerful enough to suppress the living beings. However, there were some worlds where the living beings' power surpassed the world and completely destroyed the world. In this way there were billions of worlds, but overall, the conflict between the two sides was roughly balanced. Neither side could really suppress the other. Obviously, their strength was equal, but the battle was quite fierce. However, although it seemed that the women's rights had changed the entire auction space, and even caused the entire auction space to shake, it did not affect any of the platforms in the auction space. In comparison, the platforms did not seem to be floating in the void. Instead, they seemed to have some kind of unimaginable power suppressing these worlds, making them extremely stable. There was even a feeling that they would not be shaken or destroyed even if the world was destroyed. Since the two of you are interested, I can't fall behind either. At this moment, another female voice was heard. Following that, the shadow of another magic treasure appeared on the central platform that was the size of a football field. The shadow of this magic treasure was in the shape of a piece of cloth. However, there were billions of things flickering on the surface of this piece of cloth. Those things seemed to form an incomparably vast and incomparably perfect world. Waves of the aura of a level 5 pseudo-sage constantly gathered from the shadow of the cloth, joining the chaos that had already reached a certain level in the entire auction hall, causing the already chaotic scene to become even more chaotic. The situation of the battles between the worlds and living beings became confusing and difficult to distinguish. It became an inexplicable chaos. The battles between the worlds and living beings. The battles between the worlds, the living beings against the worlds, the living beings against the living beings. This was the situation of intense competition and fighting. When Luo Fan stepped into the auction hall, it was his first time seeing it. And this. It was all for a level 1 pseudo-sage magic treasure that he had casually refined, or a level 1 pseudo-sage embryonic magic treasure. This made Luo Fan a little dumbfounded. But, are there any more? He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was a little looking forward to it. In this state of mind, he did not choose any of them, but waited quietly. This was actually a normal approach. Since he had taken it out to auction, wasn't it because he wanted to wait for the highest bid to sell it? Therefore, he did not choose any of them, but no one felt that it was wrong. It's really lively. Why don't I join in? An old man said with a chuckle. As he spoke, a wooden stick suddenly appeared on the platform. This wooden stick was divided into 81 sections, and each section was engraved with some kind of extremely abstract but extremely sinister pattern. With a total of 81 segments fused together, the surroundings of the wooden stick seemed to have turned into a chaotic state that was constantly changing. Even time and space seemed to have been shattered by a power that was clearly known to be extremely dangerous, but could not be identified at all. Similarly, at the same time, a powerful aura that belonged to a level 5 pseudo-sage powerhouse was emitted from the wooden stick. It filled the entire auction space and joined the chaotic battle of auras that had previously become extremely chaotic. With the addition of this aura, the already chaotic battle of auras became even more chaotic. In the endless world, all sorts of strange tribulations were born. Some were targeted at living beings, some were targeted at the world, and some were targeted at nothing. They were simply there to vent their anger. 81 sections, 81 tribulations, so that's how it is. This magic treasure is quite interesting. When Luo Fan saw the wooden stick, his eyes couldn't help but light up. It was the first time he had the thought of obtaining the magic treasure in the shape of a wooden stick. The 4 magic treasures were all level 5 pseudo-sage magic treasures. Usually, among the cultivators present, those who had not reached level 5 pseudo-sage would not be able to see even one of them. Now that they found 4 of them directly in front of them and were engaged in such an intense battle of auras, many of the cultivators present suddenly felt a little disappointed and excited at the same time. The reason for their disappointment was very simple. Almost all of them were interested in that embryonic magic treasure. Those who were at the pseudo-sage level were either interested in it for their descendants or to study the refinement method of that magic treasure. As for those who had not yet reached the pseudo-sage level, it was even simpler. This embryonic magic treasure was not a magic treasure at all. It was a living key to the pseudo-sage level. How could they not want to get it? Obviously, this was what they were disappointed about. Although the embryonic magic treasure was very important to them, they could not give away a magic treasure that was above level 5 pseudo-sage. At this moment, there were 4 level 5 pseudo-sage magic treasures competing, which obviously meant that the embryonic magic treasure was not fated with them. How could they not be disappointed? It was even simpler for them to be excited about it. Level 5 pseudo-sage magic treasures were very rare. Fighting in front of them like this was simply giving them a chance to comprehend the mysteries of level 5 pseudo-sage magic treasures. If they could gain even a little bit from it, it would be of great benefit to their cultivation. How could they not be excited? Sigh. I originally wanted to pay a smaller price, but I didn't expect the competition to be so fierce. I have no choice but to bleed. At this moment, a voice that was completely different from the previous 4 echoed in the auction space. Even with the suppression of the auction house, this voice still displayed a might that exceeded one's imagination. In an instant, it completely suppressed the intense aura that permeated the entire auction space, causing the frightening aura battle scene to instantly disappear. They separated and shrank back into the 4 magic treasures. This is level 7 pseudo-sage? Luo Fan was shocked. To be able to completely suppress the aura of a level 5 pseudo-sage with just a voice, even a level 6 pseudo-sage cultivator would find it difficult to do so. To be able to do this so easily, the person who spoke had to be at least level 7 pseudo-sage. Even level 7 pseudo-sage magic treasures are interested in this so-called embryonic magic treasure? Luo Fan was secretly shocked. At this moment, a brush suddenly appeared on the central platform. As soon as this brush appeared, everything in the world appeared around it. Even countless rules and laws that were originally invisible emerged. Vaguely, there were all sorts of strange things that could be described and things that could not be described. Then, an overwhelming aura that belonged to a level 6 pseudo-sage magic treasure appeared. The brush emitted an aura that belonged to a level 6 pseudo-sage magic treasure. It filled the entire auction space. Faintly, the entire auction space seemed to have suddenly lost its original appearance, as if it had fallen into a boundless world. Luo Fan even saw living beings on the ground below, as if they were looking up at the many platforms in the sky. Level 6 pseudo-sage magic treasure. Is this good or bad? Luo Fan sighed. At this moment, he also knew that it was impossible for anything good to be displayed. He immediately activated the array of the teleportation platform according to the previous instructions on the teleportation platform. In an instant, on the central platform, the level 1 pseudo-sage cultivator, whose face was flushed with excitement, fear, and regret, seemed to have received the news. He said respectfully, "That customer is very satisfied with this bid. This transaction is successful. A level 1 pseudo-sage embryonic magic treasure will be exchanged for a level 6 pseudo-sage pen-shaped magic treasure." No one objected to his words. Even the 4 people who had fought intensely for the treasure didn't object to it. They had taken out a level 5 pseudo-sage magic treasure, which was already comparable in value to the level 1 pseudo-sage embryonic magic treasure. In fact, it even slightly surpassed it. If they were asked to pay a higher price, they would not do it. Whether the cultivator who took out the level 6 pseudo-sage treasure was a level 7 pseudo-sage cultivator or a level 6 pseudo-sage cultivator, since he was willing to take out the level 6 pseudo-sage treasure, it meant that he had won. What else could they say? Without any signs of life, the shadows of the 4 level 5 pseudo-sage treasures that had been fighting on the central platform flickered slightly and disappeared without a trace. Obviously, they had been taken back by the 4 cultivators. Following that, the shadow of the pen-shaped magic treasure also disappeared. After a short while, a very ordinary-looking brush appeared out of thin air on the teleportation platform in front of Luo Fan. It didn't seem to have any special features at all. On the central platform, the level 1 pseudo-sage treasure that Luo Fan had refined also disappeared at this moment. It seemed to have been sent to one of the thousands of platforms. As for which one it was, Luo Fan could not be sure at this time. In his opinion, there were at most level 5 pseudo-sage cultivators in this auction house. There was not even a level 7 pseudo-sage cultivator. However, it was clearly a level 7 pseudo-sage cultivator who made a move just now. How could he be sure where the level 7 pseudo-sage cultivator was? Raising his hand to pick up the level 6 pseudo-sage treasure, Luo Fan could not help but exclaim in admiration. This level 6 pseudo-sage treasure was really mysterious. Not only was it powerful, but it also had endless uses. With a slight sense, Luo Fan could tell that this magic treasure was actually a treasure of creation. As long as this magic treasure was activated, it could create everything in the world, including the universe and space-time. There was no aura belonging to its original owner in this magic treasure, nor was there any mark belonging to the other party. The spirituality of the entire magic treasure was completely integrated with the magic treasure itself, but it did not show any spirituality. Luo Fan's heart stirred slightly, and he naturally left his own imprint at the core of the source of this magical weapon. As the mark was left, the magic treasure immediately became free to do whatever he wanted. He picked up the brush and started to sketch. A figure appeared in front of him. This figure was very ordinary, but the aura it emitted was at the level 3 pseudo-sage level. Fortunately, there was a powerful suppression force on this platform. When the aura of this living being spread out, there was naturally a powerful suppression that directly acted on this living being. This prevented the aura of this living being from leaking out and being sensed by others. What a wonderful magic treasure! Unfortunately, this is activated by the realm. My cultivation realm is only at the level 3 pseudo-sage level, so the living being that I can create is at most level 3 pseudo-sage. He raised his hand and patted it lightly. The figure instantly collapsed and turned into nothingness. The power of this level 6 pseudo-sage treasure was quite strong. Its design could even directly create level 6 pseudo-sage living beings. The reason why it could only create level 3 pseudo-sage living beings was because it was limited by Luo Fan's cultivation realm. If Luo Fan's current cultivation realm was already at the level 6 pseudo-sage, the living being that he created with the help of this magic treasure would not be a level 3 pseudo-sage, but a level 6 pseudo-sage. Chapter 13:26. After obtaining such a harvest, Luo Fan no longer had the intention to stay in the auction house. He directly put the level 6 pseudo-sage treasure into his universe in his sleeve. With a slight thought, his figure disappeared from the platform and appeared at the exit of the auction house. After he left, the platform trembled slightly and turned from solid to illusory. Its presence gradually faded, and soon it completely disappeared. It was as if there had never been such a platform in the auction space. Compared to what Luo Fan had seen before, the number of platforms in this auction space had roughly doubled. Obviously, during the period of time he had been here, there were almost as many cultivators that had come to the auction house. Naturally, there were no accidents when he left the auction house. Soon, he arrived at the street outside. This auction house wasn't the largest or most magnificent building on the entire Chun Gong Island, and it wasn't the core of this treasure conference either. This was inevitable. The treasure discussion conference would last for an entire 10 years, so the most important event naturally had to appear at the very end in order to be considered the correct procedure. After walking around, Luo Fan discovered that after seeing the many auction items in the auction house, the things displayed outside were no longer attractive to him. Feeling helpless, he could not be bothered to continue searching. He found a corner of Chun Gong Island and casually opened up a world. Then, he dived into that world. There was nothing else in this world, and it was just a piece of nothingness. This entire world did not have any special effect. It didn't have any other special effects. It was just a simple isolation. It isolated all probing and power from the outside world. However, it was the best place for cultivation. I wonder where Hu Yun obtained the method to refine a treasure embryo. Could it be from the location of the primordial world that she obtained? Luo Fan recalled his experience in the auction house, and could not help but feel a little curious. The popularity of the embryonic magic treasure was beyond his imagination. It was only a level 1 pseudosage treasure, but there was actually a cultivator who was willing to exchange a level 6 pseudosage treasure for it. Furthermore, it was a level 6 pseudosage treasure that had completely erased all his imprints and did not leave any aura that belonged to him. Although the others were surprised that the cultivator could take out a magic treasure of this level, they were shocked. However, he did not feel that it was too ridiculous. Evidently, they felt that this treasure embryo might not be worth the grade 6 pseudo-saint artifact, but its value wasn't too far off. Using a grade 6 pseudo-sage artifact to exchange for it was a little too much. But it wasn't completely worthless. In such a situation, it was enough to see that this was an embryonic magical treasure. How popular it was! However, it was under such circumstances that Hu Yun directly gave him the method to refine the embryonic magic weapon. Hand it over to Luo Fan. She simply seemed as if she didn't take the method to refine this embryonic magic treasure seriously at all, and she directly took it to be common knowledge that cultivators had to know. This couldn't help but cause Luo Fan to be surprised, and he wondered if she knew how precious the method to refine this magic treasure was. With a thought, a ball appeared in front of him. After this sphere appeared, it shook slightly and turned into a large area that was enveloped by gray mist. In this area, there were tens of thousands of worlds densely packed together. After thinking about it, he raised his hand and pointed. From his sleeve, another world flew out and entered the gray mist. There were tens of thousands of worlds side by side. These were all the worlds that he had obtained from Hu Yun. None of these worlds were ordinary worlds, and none of them could be replicated. They were strange worlds that could only be produced by coincidence. Why did these worlds look like this? Why did they have such mysteries? All of these contained all kinds of deeper mysteries of the world, showing the many mysteries of the combination of time, space, matter, and energy, these four basic existences. Each of these worlds was essentially not strong for Luo Fan. He could crush countless of them with a single hand. However, it was precisely such worlds that made Luo Fan feel that his ability to open up a world could be improved by comprehending them. This is the painting realm. With ink as everything in the world, the four basic existences are all distorted and deformed. It's quite amazing. This is the book realm. Everything in the world is actually a variety of books, and even the Yuan Qi is a text. This is the flower realm. This is the magma realm. Luo Fan looked at the worlds one by one and gained a deeper understanding of these worlds. He faintly felt that his understanding of the world had become deeper. Perhaps his ability to open up a world did not improve much because of this, and he could not open up a world of a higher level than what he could originally open up. However, it was enough for him to control the types of worlds that he opened up more freely, and he could open up many mysterious worlds that he had never thought of before. Although such gains were not very obvious, it was enough to make Luo Fan feel that he had gained a lot, and his heart was filled with inexplicable joy. Time passed quickly. One day, when Luo Fan had already comprehended more than 100 worlds, there was suddenly an inexplicable feeling that was transmitted to his heart through some extremely mysterious mechanism. So its fellow Taoist black turtle. Luo Fan's heart skipped a beat, and he could not help but smile as he sensed the reason. He stopped comprehending the world, and with a wave of his hand, the tens of thousands of worlds instantly shrank, and in the blink of an eye, the entire area that contained tens of thousands of worlds turned into a very simple, fist-sized pill that fell into his hand. After putting the existence of these tens of thousands of worlds into his sleeve world, Luo Fan lifted a step and stepped out of the world that he had casually opened up. As he stepped out of that world, the world of nothingness shook slightly, and then completely collapsed, and finally disappeared without a trace. As soon as Luo Fan appeared, the time and space around his body shook slightly. Then two figures appeared there, and they were none other than Taoist Black Turtle and Taoist Bayshur. Both of them had smiles on their faces, and Taoist Black Turtle said, "So fellow Taoist was cultivating here. It took us a long time to find you." Luo Fan chuckled. "I exchanged some things before, and my heart was itching, so I stayed here to comprehend for a while. Please forgive me for causing you trouble." "Why do you say that, fellow Taoist? We were the ones who were anxious. Fortunately, we haven't missed the Real Treasure Discourse Conference yet. Why don't we hurry to the conference?" Taoist Black Turtle chuckled. He did not ask what Luo Fan had obtained that made him so itchy. It was the other party's secret in the first place, and since the other party did not say, it was not his place to ask. "The Real Treasure Discourse Conference has already begun?" Luo Fan's eyes lit up. He asked. He was very interested in the Treasure Discourse Conference. The items in the auction house previously were not the most precious on Chun Gong Island, but they were already enough for him to watch with great interest. He felt that his horizons had been broadened, and he was naturally even more interested in the higher-level Treasure Discourse Conference. His heart skipped a beat. After some calculations, he realized that several years had passed unknowingly. There was less than a year left until the end of the Treasure Discourse Conference on Chun Gong Island. At this time, it was time for the highlight of the event to begin. That's right. It would be a pity to come to Chun Gong Island without experiencing the Treasure Discourse Conference, Taoist Priest Sad World said with a smile. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go? Luo Fan chuckled. Taoist Black Turtle and Taoist Priest Sad World also smiled. Then, the three of them took light steps, seemingly slow but actually fast. In a short while, they arrived at a palace in the center of Chun Gong Island. This was, in fact, Chun Gong. What a wonderful palace! It looks completely different from when it was activated and when it was not. Luo Fan looked at the palace and could not help but sigh. Previously, when he was wandering around on this Chun Palace Island, he also wandered around this area and saw this Chun Palace. However, there was a world of difference between the Chun Palace back then and the current Chun Palace. Back then, although Chun Gong Palace looked majestic and grand, it was just an ordinary palace and was no different from ordinary palaces in the secular world. Even Luo Fan did not have the desire to enter such a palace. But the current Chun Gong Palace was completely different from before. The current Chun Palace didn't look any different from before, but the feeling it gave people was completely different. Everything that was originally very ordinary had now returned to its original state of subtlety and profoundness. The places that originally seemed to be flaws had now completely turned into advantages. An indescribable nobility, perfection, and power slowly seeped out from Chun Gong Palace. At this time, the aura above the entire Chun Gong Palace surged. That incomparably powerful aura seemed to contain a large number of terrifying cultivators. How could such a palace be an ordinary palace in the secular world? It had clearly become the residence of the gods above the 9 heavens. Luo Fan stood in front of this Chun Gong Palace, full of admiration. Taoist Mysterious Turtle and Taoist Bayshur were also full of admiration at this time. Taoist Mysterious Turtle said, "Although I have seen it countless times, I still can't help but feel a little shocked every time I see the changes in this Chun Gong Palace. There are no changes at all, but it gives people such a completely different, almost too extreme impressions. This method is really beyond imagination." Exactly. I don't know how Senior Hizun did this. Taoist Bayshur also sighed. Of course, the three of them could not just stand outside this Qigong palace. They just paused for a moment and sighed with emotion about the mysteries of this Qigong palace. The three of them entered together. Upon entering, what entered one's eyes was a boundless void. Floating platforms could be seen floating in the air. Of course, this platform was completely different from the auction house. The platform in the auction house completely concealed everyone inside, making it impossible for people to see what was happening on the platform through the barrier above the platform. However, this was not the case for the platforms inside the Qigong Palace. The platform here looked like a very ordinary platform. Each platform was not big. At a glance, it was easy to see who was on those platforms and what they were doing. Moreover, in this Qigong Palace, there was also a powerful and indescribable suppressive force suppressing everything, making it so that no one could tell how strong or weak they were. It seemed that every single one of them was just an ordinary person, regardless of whether it was their aura or anything else. However, it was completely different from what they felt from the outside. This kind of suppressive force was extremely strange and powerful. The moment Luo Fan and the other two stepped into this Qigong Palace, they also felt the same suppressive force acting on them. However, the way this suppressive force manifested was extremely strange. It did not forcefully suppress everything, but it seemed to be a very gentle force that wrapped around the existence being suppressed by this suppressive force, making it impossible for their aura and other things to leak out. At the same time, it also made it impossible for the suppressed person to exert their own strength. But it did not make the suppressed person feel any discomfort. It was as if they did not use their magical power. It was not that they were suppressed to the point that they could not exert their strength, but they were just unwilling to do so. This kind of silent, nourishing change. Luo Fan could not help but feel shocked again. The power of the revered one is indeed beyond my imagination. After sensing that he was not affected at all, but he could not exert the power that he should have, Luo Fan finally could not help but exclaim in admiration. If such a wonderful suppressive force could be achieved by a cultivator who was not a level 9 pseudo-sage, Luo Fan would not believe it. Therefore, to Luo Fan, this kind of change in this Qigong Palace could only be done by the only level 9 pseudo-sage cultivator on this island. That's natural. Taoist Divine Turtle smiled. After they stepped into this Qigong Palace, a platform naturally appeared under their feet, allowing them to join the many platforms that were previously suspended in the void. The three of them looked at each other and smiled faintly. With a thought, the three platforms leaned against each other. Although they weren't completely integrated, they were very close to each other and weren't much different from one body. What are the rules of this treasure conference? Luo Fan asked with a smile. There are actually no rules in the treasure conference. Anyone can take out anything that they think is valuable, and if others find it interesting, they can take out something to exchange, Taoist Divine Turtle explained. I see. This is similar to an auction. Luo Fan nodded to show that he understood. In essence, it is similar. But generally speaking, the items that appear here are of a much higher level than those in the auction. Moreover, even a level 9 pseudo-sage treasure has appeared in the past, Taoist Divine Turtle said. A level 9 pseudo-sage treasure? Luo Fan finally felt an inexplicable shock when he heard this. A level 9 pseudo-sage treasure was a powerful existence. Any cultivator who obtained such an existence would have an astonishing guarantee of safety. Even in the face of a level 8 pseudo-sage, they would have a chance to escape. Such an existence actually appeared in a treasure conference like this and was actually taken out to be exchanged. Luo Fan instinctively did not want to believe it, but after thinking about it, he knew that there was no reason for Taoist Divine Turtle and Taoist Divine Turtle to lie to him. All that was left in his heart was shock. That's right. Unfortunately, I didn't participate in that session. I don't know who took out a level 9 pseudo-sage treasure and what it was exchanged for. Taoist Divine Turtle sighed. I didn't participate in that session either. I wasn't qualified to participate in this treasure conference back then. However, I heard that even Senior Hizun was alarmed during that session, and it almost led to a tragedy, Taoist Divine Turtle said with a smile. When Luo Fan heard their words, he looked forward to this treasure conference even more. While they were talking, people stepped into the palace one after another. Because everyone was suppressed by a suppressive force as soon as they stepped into the Chun Palace, they could not even release their auras. Therefore, Luo Fan could not tell how strong these cultivators were. Among them, were there any high-level pseudo-sage existences, or were there any existences so weak that they were not even quasi-sage existences? The moment these cultivators stepped into the palace, platforms naturally condensed under their feet and carried them to the numerous platforms around them. They became a part of the scenery in the Chun Palace. The platforms here were all the same size and appearance, and none of them changed size according to the strength of the cultivators on them. This kind of structure obviously had great benefits. Since they did not know the strength of others, they naturally did not dare to be presumptuous towards others. Since cultivators did not dare to be presumptuous towards others, this treasure conference could only be carried out within the framework set by Hizun. All kinds of meaningless conflicts would naturally be greatly reduced. This was for sure. After all, you did not know if the person you wanted to provoke was a powerful existence that could casually slap you into meat paste. Under this kind of unknown situation, the only thing they could do was to act according to the rules, not provoke anyone, and not vent their emotions on anyone else. After Luo Fan and the others arrived at the Chun Palace, they waited for another day before the number of people gradually decreased. By this time, the number of platforms in the palace had already reached tens of thousands. Almost all the cultivators who came to participate in this time's treasure conference were already here. Chapter 13:27. After another half a day, the gate of the Chun Palace slowly closed. While communicating with the others, Luo Fan already knew that this meant that the real treasure discussion was about to begin. At this moment, a figure appeared out of thin air on a platform that was larger than usual in the center of the hall. Compared to all of the other living beings present who were completely ordinary and had all of their extraordinariness suppressed, there was a world of difference between this figure and the rest of the living beings present. Although there was no aura, the indescribable charm made anyone who saw this figure immediately know that this figure was an existence that could easily crush them to death. That high and mighty, eternal and noble temperament showed to all living beings in the world that this person was extraordinary. In an instant, Luo Fan knew that this person must be a level 9 pseudosage, Hizun. Only a level 9 pseudosage existence could be so powerful, and only an existence that was closest to the sage realm could make everyone feel this inexplicable feeling just with their temperament. The gap between level 9 pseudosage is really too huge. Luo Fan sighed. Any level 8 pseudosage he had seen before was worlds apart from level 9 pseudosage. He was currently a level 3 pseudosage, but he was not afraid of level 6 pseudosage. He was also confident in escaping from level 7 pseudosage. In fact, he even had the idea of creating all kinds of special environments to escape from level 8 pseudosage. However, he was facing level 9 pseudosage. He had no such thoughts at all. He knew very well that he was simply an ant in front of level 9 pseudosage. He knew very well that he was simply an ant in front of level 9 pseudosage. At least, almost all level 9 pseudosage he had seen were so powerful that he could not even think of fighting against them. Of course, the reason for this was not because the gap between level 8 pseudosage and level 9 pseudosage was so huge. In fact, the gap between level 8 pseudosage and level 9 pseudosage was similar to the gap between level 2 pseudosage and level 3 pseudosage. If one had to quantify it, it would only be a difference of a few hundred times. Although this was already an extremely huge gap, it was still acceptable to Luo Fan. To him, such a huge increase wasn't enough to make him feel despair. However, there was nothing he could do. The gap between the level 9 pseudo-saint realm was unimaginable. If he wanted to step into the sage realm and become a sage from the 9th grade pseudo-sage realm, he would need to increase his strength by tens of thousands of times. Which of the level 9 pseudo-sage cultivators Luo Fan had not cultivated for hundreds of millions of years? Which one of them didn't become a level 9 pseudo-sage a long time ago? Such existences did not stop their pursuit of becoming saint. Naturally, the improvement of his strength would not stop. Under such circumstances, coupled with the fact that the grade 9 pseudo-sage realm was almost infinite, it was easy to imagine how much they would improve in there. In other words, it could be said that Luo Fan had encountered a level 9 pseudo-sage existence. They were not just level 9 pseudo-saints, but had been cultivating at this level for countless years. They might have even taken a few more steps and were already extremely close to the sage realm. Such existences were naturally countless times stronger than level 8 pseudo-sages. For Luo Fan, the pressure was naturally beyond imagination. Luo Fan didn't think about this at first, but when he saw the unimaginably powerful Hizun in front of him, all these thoughts emerged in his mind, and he instantly grasped the truth. It's a pity. If such a level 9 pseudo-sage could obtain a primitive world, he might be able to become a sage in the demon realm soon. Luo Fan sighed. Each of these level 9 pseudo-sages had almost reached the end of their path of cultivation. Perhaps they were only left with one chance and one key to become a sage. Thinking of this, Luo Fan became more and more worried. He was worried that the existence of the primitive world that he had would be of use to Hizun, and whether it would cause Hizun to go crazy. Hizun swept his gaze across the entire Qin palace. At this moment, everyone felt as if they were being suppressed by a terrifying world, and their bodies couldn't help but tremble slightly. Fortunately, Hizun quickly shifted his gaze. Otherwise, most people might have lost their composure. Suddenly, Hizun let out a soft cry of surprise and looked in a direction. This direction was impressively where Luo Fan was located. Being stared at by this gaze, Luo Fan suddenly felt uncomfortable all over, and his heart almost jumped out of his chest. He was almost certain that this was clearly the special aura that Hizun had sensed from him. However, he didn't know how much Hizun had sensed, and whether he had really discovered the primitive world that he had hidden. A trace of doubt flashed in Hizun's eyes. However, he didn't do anything, as if he really hadn't sensed it clearly. His gaze quickly shifted and turned to the other side. After quickly sweeping his gaze across everyone present, Hizun said, "This year's treasure discussion will now begin. This year's treasure discussion will follow the same rules as before. Any fellow Taoist can bring out a treasure for everyone to appraise and exchange with others. If no fellow Taoist brings out a treasure for 10 consecutive days, or if it has been a year, I will take out a treasure and end this year's treasure discussion." This rule was exactly the same as the previous few times, and there was nothing much to say. After Hizun finished speaking, he smiled slightly and nodded towards everyone present. His figure slowly dissipated, as if he had never appeared. However, everyone present knew that Hizun didn't leave. He had merely hidden himself. Everything that happened in the Qin Palace was under his eyes, and nothing was missed. This time, Senior Hizun seems to be a bit anxious. In the past, he would still give a lecture. Taoist priest Beishir said after Hizun's figure disappeared. He was the disciple of a sage. Although he was a disciple, his identity was different. Even though he knew that Hizun was watching, he didn't have many misgivings and said such words. Luo Fan heard this and sighed inwardly. He sighed to himself that it was good to have a backer and then asked, "Is that so? Isn't it always like this?" Of course not. In the past, he would preach the Tao for at least a month. The reason why so many people are attracted to this treasure discussion isn't entirely because they can exchange for the treasures they need here. A large part of the reason is because of Senior He's preaching the Tao for a period of time at the beginning. I didn't expect Senior Heizun to be so busy this time. I'm sure many fellow Taoists will be disappointed, Taoist priest Beisher said with a smile. Hearing this, Luo Fan suddenly understood. He also knew why Taoist priest Beisher and the others were so eager for him to participate in this treasure discussion. It turned out that they wanted to share some of the opportunities of listening to a level 9 fake sage's lectures with him. Although he was secretly grateful, he didn't say much on the surface. Taoist priest Beisher could give such an evaluation because he had a backer. He didn't have any, so he naturally couldn't say anything. Didn't you see that even Taoist Divine Turtle didn't dare to speak at this time? As they spoke, a cultivator had already arrived on the platform where Senior Heizun was. In his hand was a treasure that looked like a pagoda, and he began to introduce it. That treasure seemed to have been unsealed on the platform and began to emit a powerful aura that filled the entire Qin palace. Of course, although this aura was powerful, it didn't cause any negative impact on any cultivator on the platform. It was as if the platforms themselves had the ability to defend against auras. Although the cultivators on the platforms could clearly feel that this aura was extremely powerful, they didn't feel as uncomfortable as if they had encountered an aura that exceeded their endurance. As expected, the grade is much higher than the auction house. It's just a level 8 fake sage treasure. Luo Fan couldn't help but exclaim. Haha, fellow Taoist, you misunderstand. This is actually. It's considered precious in the treasure discussion. Normally, level 5 or 6 pseudo-divine treasures were the most common. Level 7 or 8 pseudo-divine treasures were the most common. Level 7 or 8 fake sage treasures are still quite rare. Taoist Divine Turtle said with a smile. That's right. Taoist Beisher also smiled. When Luo Fan heard this, he could not help but laugh. He knew that he had taken it for granted. However, when he thought about it, it made sense. If they were really level 8 pseudo-saint treasures, why would Taoist Beisher and the others bring up the matter of level 9 pseudo-saint treasures in the treasure discussion conference? Since it was a treasure discussion, it wasn't like the auction house. It was just a naked transaction. After the cultivator with unknown strength finished introducing his pagoda-shaped magic treasure, some cultivators first exclaimed in admiration that this was the magical use of magic treasures. Then, they raised some difficult problems and asked the cultivator how to solve the problems encountered by the magic treasure. If that cultivator was able to solve most problems, he would not be able to do so. But there were also some problems that were difficult to solve. He didn't hide it and directly said that he couldn't solve them, so he asked everyone present for advice. After a series of questions and answers, a cultivator went onto the platform and took out a mirror-like magic treasure. He introduced it next to the pagoda and wanted to exchange it for the level 8 pseudo-sage treasure with the first cultivator. So it's him. I didn't expect him to be tempted too. But this suppressive magic treasure is indeed quite useful. Taoist Xingui couldn't help but be surprised when he saw the cultivator who went up later. Oh, do you know him, Taoist Xingui? Luo Fan asked in surprise. This is Taoist Medicinal Fire, a level 7 fake sage expert. Before he broke through, I had some dealings with him for a while. Taoist Xingui explained. Judging from his expression, he was obviously a little disappointed. This made Luo Fan instantly realize that the relationship between him and Taoist Medicinal Fire was not that simple. At least, in the previous day, many people came to greet him, and Taoist Xingui also went to greet many people, but Taoist Medicinal Fire was not among them. Whether it was those who came to greet him or those he went to greet, there was no one. If there was no deeper secret behind this, it would be inexcusable. But of course, this had nothing to do with Luo Fan. Since Taoist Xingui didn't say, he naturally didn't ask. Therefore, although he had some thoughts in his mind, he just smiled and nodded as if he didn't. The mirror-like magic treasure in Taoist medicinal fire's hand was a level 8 fake sage treasure, and its surface rippled with watery light. It was as if it had a world made entirely of water. According to Taoist medicine Hua, he had inadvertently obtained this magic treasure. But because it didn't match his own path of cultivation, it was like casting pearls before swine. It had been lying there for tens of thousands of years, rotting. This time, he took it out to exchange for the tower-like magic treasure, and at the same time, to obtain the sacrificial method of the tower. The owner of the tower-shaped magic treasure seemed to be quite interested in the mirror-like magic treasure. After everyone's comments and his own investigation, the owner of the tower-shaped magic treasure seemed to be quite interested in the mirror-like magic treasure. After the comments of the crowd and his own investigation, he finally agreed to the exchange. The two each took the other's magic treasure, left the platform, and returned to their original positions. Half a day had passed since they had started their trade. Although the whole transaction had nothing to do with Luo Fan, he didn't feel bored at all. Instead, he found it quite interesting to watch the comments of the many cultivators on the two magic treasures. The various problems that existed in the two magical treasures that originally looked so wonderful, as well as the various solutions to these problems, all made Luo Fan feel that he had gained a lot. This was the first time he had participated in something like this, and any argument put forward by any cultivator opened up a whole new world before his eyes, allowing him to look at something familiar from a direction that he had never thought of before. Even after the transaction was completed, he still felt like he hadn't had enough. "Thank you for bringing me to this treasure meet, fellow Taoist. If I hadn't come, I'm afraid I would have missed a good opportunity." Luo Fan sighed and said to Taoist Xin Gui and Taoist Bei Shi. Naturally, the two of them were humble. After the transaction was completed, another transaction didn't immediately begin, which was different from the situation in the auction house. The cultivators in the hall were still talking after the transaction. After the transaction, they continued to chat, as if they were discussing who had suffered a loss in the previous transaction, and what they had comprehended from it just now. After waiting for a long time, another cultivator came forward and took out his treasure. Sure enough, compared to the level 8 magic treasure that appeared before, the magic treasure that appeared this time was only a level 5 magic treasure, which was completely different from Luo Fan's original guess. "That's normal." Luo Fan sighed and immersed himself in this treasure meet. Compared to the previous level 8 pseudo-saint treasure, the discussion this time was even more lively. The reason was very simple. Although the level 8 pseudo-holy treasure was mysterious, not everyone was qualified to participate in the discussion. If one did not have a sufficient understanding of the level 8 pseudo-holy treasure, and if one's realm was not high enough to sense the level 8 pseudo-holy treasure, participating in the discussion would only be embarrassing oneself. However, this level 5 pseudo-sage treasure was different. Even a level 2 or level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator could express some opinions about it and raise some valid doubt. Obviously, there were more cultivators of this level among all the cultivators present. This time, the level 5 pseudo-divine treasure was not exchanged. After a few days of discussion, the cultivator returned to his platform with his level 5 magic treasure. However, although he did not exchange it, the cultivator was not depressed or discouraged at all. Instead, he was quite happy, as if he had gained a lot. That was how it was. When they took out their magic treasures, they did not necessarily have to abandon that magic treasure. Instead, they had the thought that it was good to exchange it, but it was not a bad thing to not exchange it. More importantly, they wanted to brainstorm and provide some ideas for their next step in refining magic treasures, or provide some inspiration for their next step in cultivation. Just like that, the treasure discussion continued like a raging fire. Every few days, a cultivator would go up with his treasure. Most of them were magic treasures, but there were also some oddly shaped things, such as strange fragments of magic treasures, or things that had developed for a long time, developed in a very special civilized world, or simply some kind of magical power. Among these many treasures, the ones that were traded successfully and the ones that failed were traded evenly. There was no difference in the number of successful trades, nor was there a difference in the number of unsuccessful trades. Luo Fan was very interested in such a treasure meet. He listened to the many cultivators express their different opinions on the same treasure from different perspectives. He watched them argue again and again. He listened to their wisdom and knowledge colliding, bursting out brilliant colors. He felt that his horizons had been broadened. He felt that he had a deeper understanding of the cultivation system of the demon realm. Just like that, half a year passed. One day, Luo Fan's heart suddenly stirred. He felt some kind of strange connection with him through some kind of extremely mysterious mechanism. An inexplicable message was transmitted to his heart through this connection. This is Hu Yun? His heart skipped a beat as he suddenly understood what this connection was all about. After analyzing the aura, his expression changed. He stood up and said to Taoist Bei Shi, "Fellow cultivator, something happened to a friend of mine. I have to leave first." "Something happened to your friend? If that's the case, I'll go with you. Perhaps I can be of some help." Taoist Bei Shi said. "No need. I can deal with this. If there are too many people, it will be troublesome." Luo Fan shook his head and said. Chapter 13:28. Almost no one would leave before the end of the Treasure Discussion Conference. This was not because the Treasure Discussion Conference did not allow people to leave once it was held, but because the cultivators who participated in the Treasure Discussion Conference all cherished this Treasure Discussion Conference. After all, it was a great opportunity to communicate with so many powerful people and see the many mysterious and precious treasures of the heavens. It was not so easy to encounter such an opportunity. Therefore, although the Churn Palace closed its doors after the Treasure Discussion Conference began, this only meant that the Treasure Discussion Conference had begun and those who had not entered could no longer enter. It did not completely prohibit the cultivators who participated in the Treasure Discussion Conference from leaving. When Luo Fan came to the door directly opened. He didn't even need to do anything. As the door opened, many cultivators in the Churn Palace couldn't help but look over. They wanted to see what the cultivator who had left the Treasure Discussion Conference early looked like, something that hadn't appeared for countless years. This kind of thing was really too strange. Even though these cultivators were not ordinary cultivators, they were still extremely curious and had a strong desire to understand. However, they naturally couldn't see anything. After all, the suppressive power in the Churn Palace was too strong. Anyone here looked like an ordinary person. When they looked at him, Luo Fan looked the same as them. He also looked like an ordinary person. How could they see anything deeper? Luo Fan didn't care about the attention he was suddenly receiving. The platform in the Churn Palace was completely open. Everyone could see each and every one of them at a glance. And for these cultivators, even if they appeared to be ordinary people, their nature of cultivation would not change. Anyone who looked at them would naturally have a photographic memory. They would remember everyone's appearance, figure, and many other characteristics. As a result, in the period before, Luo Fan's appearance, figure, and so on were naturally clearly remembered by all the cultivators present. This time, when they looked over again. But it wouldn't affect him too much. He already knew what he should know. What he shouldn't know, he wouldn't be able to obtain more. He didn't pause, didn't hesitate, and stepped out of the Churn Palace's door. The moment he stepped out of the door of the Churn Palace closed behind him. Just like in the past few months, Churn Palace was directly isolated from the outside world. After leaving the Churn Palace, Luo Fan took a step forward and his figure instantly crossed hundreds of millions of miles. They arrived at a remote place. Here, the surroundings were empty, and Chengong Island was nowhere to be seen. After he arrived, the space around his body suddenly fluctuated intensely. This kind of fluctuation was extremely mysterious. It looked like an elastic rubber cloth was suddenly being rolled by something huge, as if something was trying to squeeze out from it. With a thought, Luo Fan raised his hand. In an instant, the area within a radius of tens of thousands of miles was enveloped by a strange world. The world itself did not appear very grand or vast. It did not even show any special features. It looked like there was an extra layer of colorless and transparent membrane in this area. However, it was precisely such a world that was completely isolated from the outside world. As a result, nothing that happened inside could be detected by the outside world. Even with the naked eye, it was difficult to see what Luo Fan was doing inside from the outside. Being enveloped by this world, anyone who looked in from the outside would only see an empty sea. They would not be able to see Luo Fan above the sea, nor would they be able to see the changes that were about to happen. Suddenly, with a soft poof, a golden world broke through the void and appeared in front of Luo Fan. Although there was no aura in this golden world, Luo Fan knew that this was clearly a world that he had previously opened up. It was a world that was specially used to accommodate the primeval world. However, compared to when he had first opened up this world had already undergone some wonderful changes, which was why it looked like this. With a thought, Luo Fan grasped this world and sensed it slightly before sighing. In this golden world, there was indeed a world that made him feel very helpless. It was the world that he had previously refused to accept Hu Yun's gift. The primeval world. A chance to become a saint, a key to open the saint realm. After so many twists and turns, I didn't expect it to fall into my hands in the end. Luo Fan sighed. With a slight movement of his heart, countless changes appeared in the entire demon world. They instantly condensed and completely changed this golden world. In an instant, the original appearance of the world turned into a painting. It was a painting of a very strange mountain and river. It seems that there are some things that I really have to do. After rolling up this painting and putting it away in his world in the sleeve, Luo Fan thought to himself. With a light step, his figure passed through layers of time and space, heading towards a place that he could sense inexplicably. Previously, when he was participating in the treasure discussion in the Chun Palace and was listening with great interest, he received a message from Hu Yun. Along with that message, that primeval world also came. That primeval world, under Hu Yun's means, turned into an existence that seemed illusory yet real, and seemed to exist yet not exist. Along with that message, it directly stuffed itself into him. As long as he received that message, that world would definitely appear directly in front of him, regardless of whether he was willing or not. It was precisely because of Hu Yun's forceful method that he had no choice but to give up on the treasure discussion and directly leave the Chun Palace Island. He came to this unfamiliar and secretive place to receive that world. Fortunately, although Hu Yun had forcefully transmitted that world to give him some time to react, she did not directly synchronize that world with the message. This allowed him to barely suppress the appearance of that world and wait until he felt that the location was suitable. Only then did it truly reveal its true form. If not for this, even if Luo Fan had enveloped that world with his own world, he could not truly be sure that no other cultivators would be able to see what exactly that world was. This was even more so when there was a level 9 false saint like He Zun present. As for why Hu Yun had used such a forceful method to transmit this world's message over, the reason was obviously quite simple. The fact that she possessed this primeval world had been discovered by others, and the person who had discovered this primeval world was someone that she could not resist. She was also unwilling to submit, so she could only fight to the bitter end. She might as well give this world to Luo Fan. At this moment, Luo Fan was rather displeased. This primeval world was of little use to him, and brought him great trouble. He did not want this primeval world at all in the first place, and now that he was forced to accept it, it would be strange if he was in a good mood. He wanted to ignore Hu Yun's death. He wanted to directly abandon this primeval world or directly swallow it. However, he could not get past his own hurdle. Helpless, he could only follow the direction of that message and head towards the source of that message. Of course, there was a path for the transmission of information, although this path was extremely obscure. It was extremely abstract, but it was still related to karma. With Luo Fan's level of application of the law of karma, it was a little troublesome to find such a path, but it was still doable. As he walked and calculated with the help of the law of karma, Luo Fan soon found Hu Yun's location. After passing through an unknown distance of billions of kilometers, he came to a strange sea. The shape of the seawater in this sea was very strange. Although it was seawater, it was gelatinous like jelly. It could actually support everything that was born in it like land, and it could support everything that was born in it, cultivate in it, and even work on it. The entire sea area was extremely vast, and it was more than 10 times larger than the island he had stayed on when he first entered the demon realm. On this sea area there were all kinds of strange plants. The distribution of these plants was similar to the distribution of various plants on land. There were even all kinds of terrains. The ups and downs of the jelly-like seawater formed many mountain ranges, various basins, and plains. In addition, there were all kinds of creatures living in this sea area. Looking at their living conditions, there was not much difference from the way they lived on land. In fact, it could even be said to be exactly the same. Above this sea, Luo Fan also sensed the auras of countless ordinary mortals and cultivators. They formed countries and formed all kinds of strange civilizations. They fought and fought, displaying all kinds of hot-bloodedness, all kinds of courage, and all kinds of gratitude and grudges. What a great sea area! Seeing such a sea area, Luo Fan could not help but exclaim. He suddenly thought of staying in this sea area for a period of time and enjoying the feeling of living in such an alternative terrain. However, this was naturally not a choice he could make now. He had come here because he could sense that Hu Yun was in danger here. At the very least, this was where Hu Yun had been when she sent the message. Under such circumstances, he could only see how Hu Yun was, whether she was dead or not, and whether she could be saved. Only after resolving this matter could he consider other problems. With a move of his heart, Luo Fan's perception instantly encompassed the entire area within an unknown radius of hundreds of millions of miles into his perception. Through such perception, he was looking for Hu Yun's aura. Found it. With a flash of inspiration, Luo Fan frowned slightly and took a step forward. His figure had already entered the bottom of the sea. Although the seawater in this sea area was gelatinous and could support the survival of living beings on it like land, it was still seawater after all. It had characteristics of seawater, and there were still countless creatures living under it. It could even be said to be a different world. The void of the universe could not stop Luo Fan, and even the barrier in the state of chaos could not stop him from entering and exiting, let alone this special gelatinous seawater. After entering, Luo Fan felt that there was no difference from being in a normal space. In an instant, he arrived at the bottom of the gelatinous sea area. There was a continuous stretch of crystal buildings here, which looked like the legendary crystal palace of the Dragon King. At this moment, there was no sign of life in this building complex, but there were all kinds of inexplicable auras, which showed that there were many creatures here not long ago. And Hu Yun's aura was in this location. After arriving here, Luo Fan floated above the building complex and looked at the empty building complex below with an annoyed look on his face. He did not come here to play some detective game. With a thought, he grabbed. The auras in this building complex were instantly gathered in front of him. With a wave of his hand, the countless auras separated and evolved into a complex but complete scene. In this scene, it was the appearance of this building complex. And those auras, they turned into creatures in this building complex. There were hundreds of millions of them, and among them, most of them had already achieved the immortal realm. Only a very small number of them had not achieved the immortal realm. And among these people, the strongest were 2 level 3 pseudo-sacred stage cultivators. One of them was Hu Yun, and the other was an extremely handsome young man. Apart from these 2 level 3 pseudo-sacred stage cultivators, the strongest was only a half-step pseudo-sacred stage cultivator. And there were 2 half-step pseudo-sacred stage cultivators. The creatures formed by the auras performed their respective duties in this building complex, so the building complex was not as dead as it was now. Instead, it was full of vitality and was extraordinarily lively. And at this moment, the creatures formed by Hu Yun's aura were in the same hall as the handsome young man and the remaining half-step pseudo-sacred stage cultivators. Although they were only formed by auras, Luo Fan's means were extremely mysterious. Even so, they were like real living creatures. Not only did they have an image, but they also had voices. Very soon, they replayed everything that had happened here in front of Luo Fan. It seemed like time had been reversed and everything had happened again. I see. Why are you still so naive? To actually tell others about this kind of thing. Luo Fan sighed. After seeing the development of the whole thing, he also understood what had happened. That man seemed to be a good friend of Hu Yun. Although they were not cultivation companions, they were not much different from true cultivation companions. The 2 half-step pseudo-sacred stage cultivators beside the man were the disciples that the man valued the most. This time, Hu Yun went to Qin Gong Island to exchange for those embryonic magic treasures for the sake of the man's disciples. She wanted them to improve as soon as possible so that they could set foot on the 9 steps below the sage stage and become a pseudo-sacred stage cultivator. From the price she had paid for those embryonic magic treasures, one could see Hu Yun's attitude towards the man. After distributing the 2 embryonic magic treasures, Hu Yun told the man about her harvest from Qin Gong Island. As they talked, she started to talk about Luo Fan. She told him about the strange world that she had obtained in the past, which was actually a primitive world that could give one a chance to become a sage. After hearing this, the man was stunned and expressed his disbelief. He said that Hu Yun was overthinking and had been fooled. Hu Yun also smiled and did not say much. She only said that she was going to move her cave abode away and would not be able to see that man for a period of time. She would wait for her to truly settle down before telling him. At this moment, the man immediately became hostile and unleashed a boundless magic skill that engulfed Hu Yun and shattered her body. Fortunately, Hu Yun had already broken through and become a pseudo-sacred stage cultivator. This was the moment when her life force was at its strongest. She quickly reacted and reformed her body before engaging in an extremely intense battle with the man. During the battle, Hu Yun was still in disbelief and asked the man why he wanted to kill her. Why? Is there a need to ask? There is only one chance to become a sage. That was the man's answer at that time. This answer made Hu Yun feel like she had been struck by lightning. She felt like her worldview had been completely overturned. She almost went crazy at that moment. She wanted to destroy everything without any hesitation. However, it was a pity that the man had become a rank 3 pseudo-saint a long time before her. The moment Hu Yun unleashed her might, he had completely broken through Hu Yun's technique. In the end, he only managed to kill the disciples of his sect and the many living beings here before he managed to subdue Hu Yun. At the last moment, Hu Yun knew that something was wrong. In the end, she sent the primordial world along with the message to Luo Fan, who was far away on Qin Gong Island. At that moment, the man seemed to have sensed something. In a rage, he sealed Hu Yun into his body and left by traveling through the void, completely disregarding his original foundation. When the man finally disappeared, the aura collapsed and completely dissipated, eventually turning into nothingness. As for why this building complex was not damaged, it was not only because Hu Yun's subconscious had left some leeway, but it was also because the building complex itself had the ability to repair itself. Although Luo Fan came very quickly, The building complex itself did not suffer much damage, so it was completely repaired. After sighing, Luo Fan began to calculate where the man had gone.